All right, everybody. This is Project Herpetoculture Podcast. I'm your host, Roy Arthur Blodgett, joined as always by the very handsome Philip Leitz of Airids Only. And we have an awesome guest that I'm excited to introduce today. But before I do that, I'm going to go through our usual housekeeping. And as always, I want to give a shout out to Dylan and the Animals at Home Network for hosting our show. It's a pleasure to be part of this network alongside the GOAT himself. And we're grateful for that. And I want to give a shout out to Charlie, who edits our audio and keeps us on the rails here. He's also been boosting our YouTube version of the show a little bit. He's now patching in the refined audio there, along with a little bit of visuals. So hopefully that's a better listener experience for our YouTube listeners and watchers. And then, of course, I want to give a shout out to our sponsors. So we have Custom Reptile Habitats, who have been with us since the beginning.
Best.
And they're making some amazing PVC and HDPE reptile enclosures. Check them out. We have an affiliate link in the description and show notes. If you make a purchase through that, we'll get a little commission and at no additional cost to you.
What is HDPE?
High density polyethylene.
Oh,
it's actually I like it better for enclosures and stuff than PVC. It's harder but it's a little bit more expensive, but it's worth it.
Okay.
It's one of their options that they offer. We also have Redline Shipping, of course, for all your reptile shipping needs. Check them out at redlineshipping.com. And then we also have cold-blooded caffeine. So we have nice proprietary private label coffee with them. It's a light roast for one in coffee. And they donate a little percentage from each bag of coffee sold to conservation. So it's definitely worth supporting them. And we have a discount code for our listeners. So use Project Herp for 10% off. And the last thing, just if you want to support the show, but you don't want to go through the sponsorship stuff, that's great. We have a Patreon, and we always welcome, subscribers there. So you can find us at patreon.com/Project Herpetoculture. So with all of that stuff said, I'm very pleased to introduce our guest today, and that is Jason Hood. Jason, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, guys.
It's a pleasure, man. It's overdue. I'm glad you're here. And just to start out, we'd like to just do the standard softball stuff to begin and just hear a little bit about how what initially sparked your interest in herpetoculture. I know you've been in this game for a long time, but I don't know a whole lot about your origin story. So,
typical. I mean, I'm from Florida, so we had the typical run around Florida, catch stuff deal. Stepbrother had a couple snakes. He actually pulled I never mentioned this before on one of the podcasts. He actually pulled a Burmese out of the Everglades, or not Everglades, but Waxahachie, which is the headwater of the Everglades. A small one in, I want to say 85.
Whoa.
I remember him coming home with it, and he's like, this is a Burmese python. I caught it out. And so they've been there a minute. That's one of those things that always kind of cracks me up. It was a juvenile too at that time, but he had a yellow rat as well that he had grabbed somewhere. And my dad was always popping the rain gutters to pull primarily black racers out. So it's just kind of built an appreciation there. Plus I grew up fishing. So it was just, I'm always in nature, always in the wild. And bought in some corn snakes way back in the day. Moved from here to Massachusetts and back a couple times. And in the final time down this way, I ended up getting some stuff from Kathy Love and introduced to her. And she's just an amazing person. And some of the stuff I got from her, she stopped breeding, which is the Everglades rat snakes. So I was one of the only guys that had hypo Everglades rat snakes. So she would recommend me to customers. So I was getting recommended as a young 20-year-old kid with no real clue what I was doing, honestly, at that point.
Nice.
By, somebody who I definitely looked up to in the hobby and still to this day. I mean, she's one of those people, if you ever see her on Facebook, all the politics, all the drama, everything else, she's kind of always just right down, not even down the middle. She's not down the middle, but she's right down the logical line of what damn near everything. Like she's somebody really to kind of follow and look up to. She's always done a really great job of presenting herself everywhere. So I just really appreciate her looking out for me from the get-go. But yeah, just a great woman. But then with that, I moved to Chicago. Before I moved, I was up to around 200 colubrids. Moved up there, lost 80 in my first night from a room I put the animals in. I didn't know that it was my first night in the apartment. The thermostat was in the neighbor's unit, and she was a smoker that didn't want her husband or boyfriend to know she was smoking. So she'd crack a window to smoke a cigarette out the window. And my room went to the thermostat read 118 degrees when I woke up in the morning, as what the top temperature was. So I had to rebuild from that. And that's where I ended up getting into blackheads up there. Also joined the CHS up there. That was a huge step forward in just everything, knowledge, mentality. Down here, the guy who was my mentor was telling me not to try to use Latin names because you sound like an egotistical asshole. And I get up there and everybody's using Latin names because that's the easiest way to communicate. You try to communicate with people with common names and it just doesn't work sometimes. And we also had top-notch speakers come in to speak every month. And that was, it was eye-opening to say the least. I just had a great opportunity to see a whole different realm other than Florida's kind of a wholesale flipper vibe. Well, there's a ton of breeders. It's not it's not the same environment as it is in Chicago. And you can see that just in the veterinarian cost up there are through the roof. And you have some of the best veterinarians in the country up there. Come down to Florida, it's hard to even find a reptile vet, despite the fact that there's, so many keepers down here. And when speaking to the reptile or the vets I do talk to, they're like, reptile keepers just don't come in. So if you find one, they're dirt cheap because they're just like happy to have you. But it's up there that you had some of the best in the country. I mean, literally 5 or 6 of the best in the country right around the Chicagoland area that were all members of the CHS. Wow. And none of them were cheap, but they were all great. So it's a real interesting dichotomy to see the two different ends of things. But I ended up moving back down here, bought a house, then sold that and bought another place. So now I'm sitting on 5 acres and a big reptile building that I can't seem to get right. So here we are today.
Wait, hold on. There's so many things I cued in on all that, but there one thing in particular is the reptile building that you can't seem to get right. I feel like this is remarkable. What are you talking about? You seem to be getting lots of things right. So what do you mean?
This year I've got the Mexicanus, the Puritam limpus locality Mexicanus, and the red sulfuris. Those have been goals for the last, since they've been breedable, the last decade. Just absolute dreams. I think the red project on the sulfuris I'm in, I want to say 8 years now. And the Mexicanus have around the same timeline. So the better part of a decade, I've been trying to hit on those. And I hit both those this year. But blackheads, I struck out on for the most part. I've got a bunch of carpets in this year, struck out on them. Some of the tigers that have gone every year didn't go this year. So I have some major accomplishments this year personally. There are species I've already bred, but they're individual lines I've been wanting to breed. But I'm not, as far as overall numbers, I'm not doing well. And there's some detail I have wrong that I need to isolate and locate and figure out what it is and fix it. And I've found numerous things I've done wrong since I moved in. I just need to get the rest of whatever I'm doing wrong right, so I can go back to production where I was at. So
it's wild how it's really, really wild how seemingly small factors can make such a big difference in the way you do things. I feel like when I moved from my family's home into the shop where I'm at now, even though, I managed to still keep some stuff cranking out eggs, it was like, whoa, this is a trip, like it changed so many of the ways that I manage heat, the ways that I manage humidity, the ways that I manage escapees if they ever get out, right? The ways that I manage like sweeping and mopping. I mean, like everything changes, or at least it seems like a lot of that stuff can change when you change locations. And it's like, I never considered that. I just assumed like, I could do it the same way wherever I go. I don't know. Mm-hmm. It's kind of an interesting thing. I also think it's cool how you mention the scene change from Florida to Chicago. It's like I've heard that from several of our guests, kind of going back in the show, that there's like a lot of different folks who kind of express the same thing, where there's like, oh yeah, the Florida, the Chicago, the California, the Texas scene, they're all so different for these, obviously you have some commonalities. It's like one big Venn diagram, right? Where they all kind of converge around, reptiles and amphibians, but then there's all these, there's all these differences between those different scenes, which I think is really cool. That's something that I've never even thought of as a reality or a possibility, at least early on. Now I think about it a little bit more, but not as much.
There's a definite overlap where you've got the same, what the majority of Florida kind of represents to me in the hobby. You have that in the Midwest as well. But then there's a secondary level that's more academic minded that all the herp societies are in. So you've got numerous herp societies up there. Then they had the Midwest Herp Symposium, where all those herp societies would go to whichever was the hosting location that year, generally get a behind the scenes zoo exhibit and have a full day of talks. I ran it in, I think it was 2009 for Chicago, and it was amazing. Like just hanging out, we filled a bathtub completely full of beer and a little bit of ice. And come Sunday morning, there was exactly one beer left. And I thought, I nailed that. I got just the right amount in there. But we also had talks all day, academic talks that were amazing. So you had you have there was what's called like the Lee Watson swaps. Now it's the Scott Smith All Animal Expo in Chicagoland. You've got like the whatever the hell Ron Billingsley runs with his murders of all animals he touches, and other shows that are up there. And you've got there's basically that wholesale flipper world with a handful of breeders sprinkled in, but you also have Tinley, which is very few of those flippers make it into that Tinley Expo, and it's just breeders from around the world like we used to have down here for Daytona before laws changed and Wayne pissed people off and whatever story people give you for not coming back anymore. So it's just a different. There's definitely the overlaps, but there's also the giant differences. I would love to see a symposium system run down here, but I don't think anybody else would. I mean, a handful of people would, but it's hard to get people. Like when I ran that symposium, I made a point because I went to the previous one in, I think it was Detroit, and I got put to sleep by one of the guys talking about rattlesnakes. And I was like, man, he was just graph, map, graph, map. And so I went to every one of my guys, and one of the guys just he busted my balls during his talk about it. But I said, listen, guys, every single speaker I've invited, I said, remember, you're going to be one of 8 people on the day for 9 hours of speaking about reptiles. Right. Keep the graphs and maps to a minimum. They're boring. No one wants to see it. And then one of the guys, Zoltan Takis, said, here is a graph, here's a map, and then here's another one. I'm sorry, Jason, I had to have one more in here. It was a good time, but that sort of thing, like you don't see that in the Southeast, unfortunately. I don't know if anything goes on out in the West with that, or in even the Texas area with it, but the Midwest is great for that. They're very academic minded.
Yeah, it does seem like the Midwest really has its own herp culture there, and a lot more of that is there than out here. Even it seems like there used to be more of that out in California, and it seems like it's kind of the herp societies, I think, generally speaking, are really struggling. And that's actually something I kind of wanted to talk to you about. But before I do, I want to go back to your building a little bit. So how long have you been at your place? Is it this your second year or third year there?
Third year.
Okay. So
progressively worse every year.
Well, that's kind of what I was curious about, because it seems like I feel like with keeping herps, breeding herps, there's something about like there's some species that really respond and seem to need that consistency year after year, right? And then there's others where it's like the disruption, the upheaval, the chaos is the thing that gets them to go. And this is something that I'm just thinking about a lot lately, because I've moved several times in the last few years. Finally, my partner and I, we bought a little rundown cabin on 5 acres, and I'm building out herp buildings right now and driving myself mad doing it. But pretty soon, hopefully, I'll have the herps here, and then I can start to try and build toward that consistency. But I haven't had it, and it's interesting because I did have a couple of years in one spot, and that seemed to be really good for like some of my animals, like my Helicris, for example, seemed to respond really well to that. Got a bunch of eggs from them. But then this last year, I have had everybody somewhere else entirely. And that's when like finally the sulphureus decided to start going for me after like years and years of trying with that. But now the Helicris are like, no, dude, you gotta rebuild now.
Everybody says when you move, it screws them up.
Mm-hmm.
I get that idea, but I moved from Chicago to Florida, didn't skip a beat, had better production the first year. The next year after that, still had maintained good production, but I moved from a 1-bedroom apartment to a 20 by 20 garage, and I struggled to take care of everything with the mini split AC units, keep the temperature cool enough, and it was hectic, but it worked. Whatever I was doing, I continued to do the same. And then I moved over here with what's a 30 by 50 building, and I should be killing it. I've got a real AC unit instead of a mini split. I've got fans to circulate the air. Everything should be right. I insulated the whole thing, dropped like, I don't know, a ton of money on spray foam insulation to keep the building stable. And our mutual friend, Ron St. Pierre's telling me it's because I don't have enough chaos. I need some more chaos in my life. So, and I'm sure there's something there. I was just talking on the previous podcast. I want to get some of the little data loggers to throw into cages to see if I'm seeing the fluctuation in my temperatures, enclosures that I want to see to stimulate the animals, either colder in the winter for the blackheads, or just what is it that I'm screwing up? I gotta find it, fix it, and not repeat it. And the worst thing is, while the building might not be the problem, it might be, but I have a quarantine building, which I did insulate the walls there, but the floor is just a slat floor. There's like an 1/8-inch gap between the slats, but I just threw some wood down on top of it, but it's patchwork and it doesn't block all of the floor. So definitely cold air zooming in there. That whole building is definitely, and the main doors aren't insulated, so everything else is but the main door. So that building definitely got cold enough. Definitely saw the chaos, and everything I had in there didn't go either. So I don't know. There's something, but at the end of the day, with all of this, the answer is always the same. It's us. It's not them.
Right.
The most basic, outside of feeding and drinking, the next most basal thing in all animals is reproduction. Having reproduction is not like some great achievement. You just didn't screw up enough to interrupt that basal action.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people are like, oh, I bred this, I bred that for the first time. And it's like, cool. So you got out of their way. You're not, you didn't breed, they did. You just had the parameters not screwed up enough to make it difficult for them.
Yeah.
So I don't, basically at the end of the day, what I'm saying is I don't like the idea that people say, oh, because you move, that's why you're having a problem. That's a cop out to me. At the end of the day, it's to give Phil something here. I did martial arts, and the best way to learn is to get kicked in the face. You don't learn without getting kicked in the face. You learn how to block really quickly that way. And it's the same thing with reptiles. Failure gives you the opportunity to learn. You just have to take it. And to say it's because you moved and that's why you failed is taking away that kick to the face. That, well, it wasn't my fault. No, it's your fault. Dude, it's your fault. They're your cages. They're your animals. It's your building. It's your fault. Figure out what it is. Fix it. That's the end of the day. So when you move, if things don't work, you got to figure out what you're not doing right.
As much as I love a good martial arts analogy, and as much as I agree with you that nothing quite helps like getting punched in the face or kicked in the face with regard to memory and getting you to, oh shit, keep your hands up, right? Oh my God, up, right? I mean, this is an interesting thing to talk about because I have said that exact thing many a time with regard, but in a slightly different context, not in a this is why I didn't get breeding kind of way, but more in a I have a tendency to say about Uromastyx in particular, if you make a move, say for example, if you have an animal that's shipped to you at an early time in the season, and it, let's say you get an animal shipped to you in January. If it goes through the shipping process, the likelihood that it breeds, lays eggs healthily, has no problem, and those eggs crash and fail is astronomically high. Astronomically high. Like for one reason or another, I don't know if it's the stress from the shipping. I don't know what it is. They'll do everything else. They'll go through the motions. They'll gain weight and settle in. They'll produce eggs. They'll mate with a male, but then they lay those eggs and the eggs fail. The eggs just fail. And
I would guess that's more along the line of that the animals, while they did acclimate to your location, they did not cycle a whole season at that location. Yeah. So your timeline's off. They're not producing at the same time the breeding's happening and they're dropping in fertile eggs or whatever's going on. I can see that.
And I usually tend to think of it that, I've said that for a long time now, that you need to let the animals go through a full cycle with you. So like if you get them in January, you want to let them go to the next January before you start letting anything go get too crazy breeding wise. Now, of course, I don't think this is constant. I don't think this is always the case. And I'm totally open to the idea that perhaps if there was something that I tweaked or changed, then maybe those results would change, right? I'm totally open to that as a possibility. But I'm also kind of curious, like, you said just a minute ago, you said, oh, it's not the animals, it's us. And I agree with that too. And I actually, while you were mentioning Ron, I was looking around trying to make a meme. I really want to make a meme of his face and the that's chaos, from Jurassic Park. I want to find a way to put those two together, get it on the internet. So I'm working on it as we talk right now, because I'm like, I can make this meme. I'm just trying to figure out which picture from Jurassic Park to use. But like, I can't help but feel like, if we're going to acknowledge that these animals all kind of have their own, we all know that each animal has their own personality and their own sort of preferences and their own whatever. Isn't it possible like that there are just some seasons where an animal's like, dude, fuck it. I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to breed this year. I need a year off. I need to chill out. Isn't it possible that there's something else going on that is not necessarily anything that you're doing that might interrupt the perceived breeding success or what we would normally perceive as breeding success? I don't
think so in this case, because it's what I'm talking about. You're talking about acquiring a new animal. I'm talking about having my own collection that I've moved.
No, I think that again.
Too. And what I'm talking about is the moving process. I don't think when you have a bunch of animals that are all together, have complete failure of your breeding season to me says you're missing something that you were doing previously. Because like when I moved, like the one thing I realized 9 months after my move is I never put my timers back on. I was just going out there by hand, flipping lights on and off every day, like it was part of my procedure. And then finally, like I was talking to my buddy Scott, and I'm like, "Why the hell am I failing this year? What's going on?" And he's like, "I don't know." So what did something change with your lights? Your light, the wattage you're using, the brand. I'm like, "Yeah, I definitely do light bulbs. They're getting a little bit longer time probably as I'm working more now." And he's like, "Why would that matter? Don't you have them on timers?" And I'm like, "Fuck, where are my timers?" And I went through this major search around everything, and I have a secondary building out here that we just kind of use for storage, and the box that had the timers was not important according to my wife apparently, so she stuck it out in the other room, and I never even apparently weren't important enough to me to think about it either, because I didn't go looking for them, and it never occurred to me. That's what I mean. Like there's little things I've definitely screwed up that I've fixed in the meantime, but there's something else I'm doing or that I'm not making sure is happening. That's part of this, the cycling of the animals that I'm just not getting right. Because one or two animals not going, sure, that's fine. But to have the majority of the collection not producing, that's on me. And that's what I'm talking about. The idea that people make it the animal's fault whenever they move and do something wrong, that's a cop out to me.
He thrives under pressure. He's got to put himself under the pressure,
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, I got on board with that. I mean, I do definitely. It does frustrate me sometimes when folks don't seem to be aware of when they're getting in their own way, whether it's with their logic or with the way that they're thinking about something, or with the way that like with a process that is, something about their process they don't want to let go of, they don't want to change. Well, it worked before. I'm like, yeah, it worked before. Well, who fucking cares? You got to try it. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you got to try something else. Sometimes you really got to switch it up. Sometimes you got to be willing to like, shit, maybe let's get them way colder than I thought is worth, is needed. I mean, that's a terrible example. I'm just saying, yeah.
Something I tried to do with the animals that I did previously successfully was manipulate the light cycle to push them to breed earlier in the year. Because down here, the big show is Daytona. So you want all your colubrids out before Daytona, but colubrids traditionally lay and hatch out basically the same week of Daytona for whatever reason. Like it's the second weekend or third weekend in in August rather. And generally most of my colubrids are producing and either the week before. It's basically that wherever the show falls, there's a 3-week window of most of my colubrids hatch out right then. So either I have animals that have not shed or just shed once and haven't had a chance to feed, or that they're coming out the egg. And it's one of those shows where you classically see people bringing egg boxes. So I went ahead and got these timers they follow the sunrise sunset cycle automatically. They're intermatic. I can't remember now. I just looked it up for somebody the other day. But Intermatic makes it. It's a solar timer. But I have the lights following that. But it gives you the opportunity to change your dates. You select the date. You select the location. So I have some that are on North Carolina, some that are on Florida, because your day-night cycle is slightly longer here than it is in North Carolina. And I pushed them all a month earlier. So they're, instead of being right now, they're a month ahead of time. So everything should have came a month earlier for me. They went the other way. I'm getting things that are going to be up to a month later. So at this point, I'm just going to go back. I haven't had a good year since I moved here. I finally have all the timers. I thought I was golden. I'm going to go backwards, set the timers to the right damn day, the right location. Let's start there. Let's have a good year or two. Let's have production again. And then I'll start screwing with things, trying to manipulate them to my needs. But I think it's my light cycle and the temperature cycle just didn't match up. Florida stayed warm longer this year, didn't get as cold. So, there's things there. But I have an AC unit, and it's one of the things always kind of to run my AC unit harder, to make it cool the whole building down further than I do already. It's just money. And no matter how cold I make that thing run, I guarantee I'll make more money if all my animals are successful than I'll spend running that electricity. So there's no reason not to do it other than it just I already got beat turning the AC down that low as a kid, and it gets to me,
Yep. Got to overcome that childhood trauma one way or another here.
Oh, that's
well. I kind of want to backtrack a little bit to the Herp Society things. You mentioned, I mean, it sounds like the CHS was pretty like instrumental in your kind of development as a herpetoculturist, as a keeper, and I just feel like that's something that's missing in herpetoculture nowadays. Is just like what are the mechanisms that we can kind of shepherd the next generation in, that's not like Jay Brewer dodging retics, on a reel. So I'm curious if you could speak to that a little bit, just your experience of it.
We couldn't figure it out, man. I got to be honest with you. I wish I had an answer for you. Right before I left, I started the Junior Herp Society. An obvious mechanism to get people involved. But the irony of that is kids are humans at mid-teenage years. They don't want to be around the adults, no matter who they thought was cool, unless we had some amazing kids, like kids that were throwing questions at me and catching me off guard with like, oh, I don't have an answer for you. Like, whoa, that was a good question kind of kids. And then kids I would throw questions at, I thought, oh, I got them here. And they would nail all the answers that some of my other people that ran the society with me, the Junior Herp Society with me, were sitting there looking at me like they don't know the answer. And then one of the little 12-year-olds would pop up with the right answer, like smart kids. But I just know that age like 13, 14 years old to about 17, 18, 19, somewhere in there, they disappear. They're too cool to come to the Herp Society meetings. They're all a bunch of dorks. We're not going to hang out. And then they get a little bit older. They get a little more self-confidence because now they don't care about some of them just never come back. And some become, the next line of doctors and vets and biologists, but they stop caring so much about being made fun of for being the snake boy or lizard girl or whatever it is. Sure. And they come back in their late teens when they've developed more as individuals. And that really is the thing is you have to spawn that energy in the youth, in that old enough to know enough to have a conversation. So like 8 years old to like 12 years old, that window, and then sit there and wait for them to come back when they're in their late teens, early 20s. And you send out 50 and you get back 10 and you call yourself good.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Sorry. I definitely relate pretty heavily to that. I mean, I feel like we were talking with, I think it was Eddie Soto. We were mentioning like barriers to entry and like, what are some of the things that keep people from being a part of this and doing it and pursuing it and being interested in it. And I remember kind of relating on that show that, I got picked on ruthlessly for every one of my interests, not just reptiles, but reptiles was one of them. And that, in fairness, like, not that this makes it okay or anything, reptiles was one of those interests that just came out no matter what I could do. It was like, I got a presentation couldn't go by at school that I didn't try to make about reptiles or about Steve Irwin or about, you name it. So it was like, those were the things that really, really interested me. But I'm not going to lie. Like there were moments and times where, the right group of people giving me the right kind of shit about the fact that I loved reptiles and that I was into it was like, it definitely made me think more than once about like, man, maybe I'm fucking done with this. And maybe I don't want to do this anymore. And maybe I hate it or whatever, that's a big thing. I feel like maybe I was really lucky because I was psyched enough on it to not care that much. I mean, it cared a lot. It hurt, but I was like, I'm still going to do this. Like, I'm still going to fucking keep lizards. But
what's crazy is it's the people that are doing okay in their life that let that bother them. And I say that because when we ran, we had an event called Reptile Fest, which was an outreach event. No animals were for sale. We filled 40,000 to 50,000 square feet of space, brought in 200 plus species of reptiles and amphibians that were all private, everybody's private collection. And you couldn't get reptile people to show up. The reptile show crowd, 220 species on exhibit every year. You couldn't pay these idiots to show up. When else are you going to see a sun gazer in person, or an armadillo lizard in person, or an adult blackhead, or an adult sulphurus with my stuff? There's just, we had like 16 species of crocodilian on exhibit one year. We had some guy who died that had a whole turtle collection that ended up in our adoptions. We had Peter Pritchard, one of the leading turtle people in the world, there to come look at them to identify the turtles, because we couldn't identify them, because the guy who had died had been also smuggling animals in from around the world, and there were turtles there. We didn't know if they were hybrids or new species or undescribed species. We just didn't know. So as a reptile people, you'd think they would want to come, but they wouldn't. But in that, we had a handful of groups that had outreach that they did. One was Project Exploration. That's Dr. Paul Sereno's outreach to Southside kids in Chicago. And a buddy of mine, I just looked at his name the other day, I can't think of it now. He was a lawyer and he did the same thing. And we had one of the guys coming over from California, was coming into town while we had the event going on. And this is right when the Python thing was happening on a federal level. And he said to me, he's like, hey, man, I know you got that event going on. I know you got this outreach going on. So I had mentioned it somewhere. He goes, if you got any good sob stories, please let me know. And I'll come in there and I'll film it. You know, if any of these kids that have got some crazy sob story being on the South Side and then reptiles saved them, that'll be powerful. Let me know what you can find out. So I tried to reach out to Paul Sereno. He's world famous, friends with Oprah. Too busy to talk to me. Plus, he's a professor and all this other stuff. I reached out to my buddy, whose name I almost had, and I said, "Hey, man, do you guys have any sob stories with your group of kids?" And he basically cussed me out. Told me, "Go read my damn webpage. Can't believe you're asking me this." And I had never read his webpage. And dude, I went and read his webpage, and I was in tears, because these kids can't they can't cross the street to get to they've never been in a supermarket. 78% of his kids had never been in a supermarket. And like 92% know somebody directly who's been a victim of gun violence. Like that's almost every kid in the program. Mm-hmm. And they can't go to a grocery store. And I'm sitting there looking at all these stats, and these kids showed up no matter what. He said these kids, like he tried, one of the kids, he asked him if he could just drop them off, let them take the bus home, because there's a Bears game letting out. And it was going to kill him trying to get in and out of the South Side, from back to the North Side to the Bears traffic. And the kid's like, yeah, sure. So he drops him off, drives down the road, and he had an alligator in the vehicle. And the alligator made a noise, and just, you're a herper, you hear a noise and you got to look to make sure it didn't pop the lid or something. Looks over his shoulder and sees the kid's jacket there. And it's like, it's football season. So, somewhere in the fall. And he's like, shit. And he spun around. He knew the kid only had one coat. He spun around to try to go back and catch him before the bus came. Goes up to the bus stop. Nobody's there. He ends up driving around a little bit, spots the kid tucked up on the front steps of a church right there, waiting for the church to let him in to sleep there overnight. He's like, man, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I was thinking about it. I can't get home right now. Why not? Because, it's too late. Mm-hmm. This kid was 6'4", totally jacked, like probably 260, 270 of pure muscle. Looked scary from across the street. He was scared to walk down his street at that time of night. But I'll be damned if he didn't make every single event Dan ran, and just to come and hang out with the reptiles. He would make every event. So it's like, well, you're saying, I think it's if you're in a comfortable living space and you think, everybody thinks they had a rough living space. Mm-hmm. I've never thought I can't walk down a street in my life. There's been some streets I said, nah, maybe I shouldn't. I've been a couple times where I've seen guys that I know are going to try to roll me if I don't do the right actions. But I've never thought I'm going to get killed walking down the street.
Yeah.
And that's what that kid deals with on a daily basis. And that kid still doesn't care what anybody calls him, reptile boy or nothing. He's still making it out to those events. So it's amazing that power that's there. And unfortunately, we never got his story on video or anything, but he was also like the sweetest damn kid, man. I bought him lunch and gave him a shirt because he was just killing it at our reptile event. He was, carrying all these heavy cages and everything else all around the place, helping us set up, helping us break down. And everybody got a shirt and a lunch anyway, but I just gave him what everybody else was getting anyway. Mm-hmm. And he was so appreciative. Like no one ever looked out and gave him anything before. And it's crazy, but there's something to be said for reptiles. I think there's a saving grace for a lot of people that they're not going to fit in. They're not going to be welcome into society for whatever reason. Like I played basketball my whole life, but I was never accepted into the jock crowd. I was never a part of that. I was always in the weirdo crowd. I didn't even have reptiles back then. I was never part of that follow the pack mentality. I was too individualistic to mesh with the jocks. So I hung out with a bunch of all the weirdos and freaks, and then I became a reptile person. Which I probably already was.
It was just in there latent somewhere,
Yeah.
I love the idea of like latent herpetoculturist. Yeah. Like it's some gene
thing, man.
That doesn't turn on until you're like past the age of 13 or something. Like a reptilian bar mitzvah. There's got to be something. There's something in there. There's like a reptilian quinceañera, whatever the reptile version of that. There's something in there.
There was definitely some bar mitzvahs in the Jewish community up there with the Reptile Society. So there's something.
Oh, that's awesome.
That's something else I miss about Chicago. It's just all the different cultures that were there. You kind of get monoculture in Florida. I mean, there's definitely different cultures down here. You got the Cubans and Jamaica. There's little communities, but not like there. It's just nothing compares to a big city cultural onslaught you get going anywhere in a big city.
Yeah, very different. Yeah, it's definitely not the same thing at all.
So different. It's true.
Man, oh man. So I'm going to just snipe this question from Roy because you wanted to ask this, I'm sure. But the question is, can you tell us about your experience herping in the Madre de Dios?
Oh, it was 5 days, 4 nights, one of which I spent spewing from every orifice.
All right.
Midway, we went out. We found a bushmaster. I came back and I was telling my wife's got autoimmune disease. She can't hike all these trails constantly like I was doing. So she stayed back at the camp. We hit a bushmaster. It's like, this is heaven. We never touched it. I knew it wasn't going to move. I went back there and I was so excited, but it was like day 3 or 4 that we were there. Had to be day 3 because day 3, whatever. I was hungry. I was starving. I was excited. Like, of my dream species to see out there, that was definitely a top 5 species. The high was high from that I got back there. I'm talking to her and I'm just chowing away on everything. And they had thawed out beef for us because my wife said, "Hey, you're not eating pork in the jungle. You're going to get the worm that makes you crazy. So we're going to talk to them about getting beef." And she did. And for 27 soles, which is like $9, we bought a piece of beef out of the freezer that fed everybody, apparently, because everybody had beef. No one got pork. But we had beef 2 days in a row. And I don't think they refrigerated it for the second day.
Right.
Which was this day that we saw the bushmaster at night. And I ate all the vegetables and drank the juice. They have a juice they make out of the purple corn, but really it's a Kool-Aid, mix it with the powder with water thing. Where are they getting the water? I don't know what it was. Bad meat, eating the veggies or the water, but I did it all that night when you weren't supposed to. Like, these are all the basic things they tell you not to do, but Bushmaster had me too jacked to think.
Yep.
Did it all. We got into the orchard that was right next to us because I was hearing that there were tree boas that were found there, both Amazons and emeralds. In like a day or two after we left, they popped 2 different emeralds in that orchard. So we were in the right spot for that too. Yeah. But we got most of the way through that, and my guts just started rumbling and tumbling, man. And I finally threw up. I like, all right, I feel better, babe. Let's go get this Bushmaster. She's like, no. So she drugged me back to camp, and it was amazing because it was the same spot. If you ever see the video of Terry Burwell, I believe it is, with the giant yellow tail Crebo, I was in the same location that he was, the same exact camp, and they did get a Crebo while we were there, while I was in bed. They popped the Bushmaster. I mean, a Brazilian rainbow getting chewed on by a 7-foot blind Musarana. So, whoa. And that ironically, that's that happened. There was another animal, Philomedusa, the frogs, and then something else was found while I was in bed. But they ran out of snake bags, and they were going to go let everything loose. And my wife went and snatched all the snake bags and ran them back to our cabin. So she figured I'd be out of bed eventually. She knew I wanted to see them. So she basically stole them. And I gave a talk about that at the Herp Society, going back to Herp Societies. And when she was trying to get the visa, the fiance visa to come to the US, the lady was just like rubbing the denied stamp with her hand, talking to her. And she says, well, I guess that's about it then. And my wife's like, no. And like just out of terror, grabbed the Herp Society bulletin and shoved it across the table at her and goes, look at this. And it was, a picture of me and her in a big boa at one of the zoos. So the lady's like, what? Oh, you went to the jungle? Because none of the embassy workers, Lima's in the desert. Lima's like southern SoCal. It's all high desert. It's different even that, because there's no moisture, there's no wildlife, there's nothing there. Like there are no rats in the street, there are no bugs anywhere. There's a handful of birds. There's a handful of bugs, of course, but it's not what you think of when you think of the Amazon.
Peru.
Yeah.
We were in the Amazon, and none of the people that work the embassy ever go to the Amazon. So that initially fascinated her just right there. And then they were like scanning the story, and like she went out and got like 2 or 3 other people, brought them back in, and one of them said, like, is this right? You stole snakes for your fiance? Well, not stole them. I grabbed them so they couldn't let him go. Until, oh, you love him? Okay, yeah, let her go. So like she was,
I love it,
and denied, and that craziness in the Amazon got us her visa. But yeah, that's dude, it was amazing. So like for sulfurous, topic of conversation, supposedly, we'll get there eventually, I know. But the butterfly girls, there's different people there. The butterfly girl comes back and she says, so I know the big black heads with the yellow tails are yellowtail Crebos, but what are the big yellow heads with the black tails?
Oh shit.
Like, what? Yeah, there was one that was like probably, I don't know, it was definitely over 10 feet long, laying out all the way across the path. And I didn't know what it was. And it shot up into a tree when I got close to it. Like I thought it was a branch at first. It was so big. And then it shot up into a tree, and that's what it looked like. I'm like, where? It was a couple thousand meters down a trail and half hour ago. And I still went running down the trail because that was among my top 5 was definitely sulfurous, of course, Amazon tree boas and the Bushmaster. But then sulfurous was like definitely way up there. And I just not just missed. I missed it by a half hour, and who knows how much space by the time I got there. But that was
probably just up in the tree looking at you.
He gave me a approximate meter mark because they hang little tags like they have the stakes that they put in the ground, stake off, and they tie that nylon tag around it. They have those all throughout the jungle with not mileage, but meter markers. So you know you're 1,200 meters down Purple Trail, and all of them are different colors. So you know what trail you're on and how far you are from camp and everything. And so she gave me a pretty good approximation of where it was. But if it truly was over 10 feet long, that thing, it just would have
could have been anywhere.
Cruising in a half hour, man.
Yeah.
The reason to go back.
All right. Yeah, there you go. So let's talk sulfurous then. I mean, we're dancing around it here, so we got to talk about sulfurous. So what was your introduction to sulfurous? I want to hear, because I don't think I actually know this.
So the late great Gavin Brink picked up, ironically, a pair of Poecilionotus from a store 30 miles from my house here, but he was in Chicago at the time. There was a pair of, at that time, Stussy Poecilionotus. He ordered them in, brought them in, showed it to me at Reptile Fest. He's like, "Hey man, what do you think of these things?" I'm like, I don't know, because they were in that juvenile, not so pretty stage.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you don't understand. They're this, that, and the other. And he gives me the whole rundown of them. I'm like, not really doing it for me, bro. I got to tell you, man. No. I'm like, oh, you don't understand. But he got it in my head. Susties. And then, go over to his house and they're a little bit bigger and they started to color up. And I'm like, what's going on, man? They were just like little brown turds last time I saw them. And now they got these orange and red specks and yellow specks. What's going on with that? He's like, dude, that's what I'm telling you, man. Every time they shed, more and more the color comes out of them. And I'm like, okay. But then I take my first trip to Peru. My now wife, then girlfriend at the time, she asked me, what do you want to do? I'm like, I want to go to the jungle. She goes, well, that doesn't work. You need to plan that out a little further ahead of time than while you're here. Because how about we go to a zoo? I'm like, sure. So she looks around, and we ended up getting incredibly lucky with the guy who works for the Department of Health there, who happens to be a amazing herper. And the department he was working in was an anti-venom production lab.
Ooh.
And we get there, and there's all sorts of snakes in the place.
That's
and I don't think it was even that trip, but I think it was the following trip before I finally asked him. And they weren't producing anti-venom for snakes. It was for scorpions and spiders. So they had the Chilean recluse down there and some little scorpion down there that was within the Lima territory or city state there that was actually nailing people, and young and old could die from it. And it was a pretty serious thing, but people in the jungle, the only people get bit by the snakes, and there's no money. Like everywhere else in the world, like Papua New Guinea, it wasn't for Marco Shea and his buddies, there would be no Papuan Taipan anti-venom. Like if there's no money, there's nobody's working on it. So that's not what they were doing. They were just working on the other, the invertebrate anti-venom. But in that collection, there's a 9-foot, at that time, Stussy sulfurous. That's their outreach animal that they showed all the school kids. And the guy's like, hey, do you want to hold it? And I'm like, kinda, but how is it? Because it's a big damn snake, man. I don't know. It's good. We give it to the kids. I'm like, all right, cool. He pulls it out because he was trying to hand me some other stuff that was a little sketchy as far as toxicity.
Yeah.
I'm like, is this thing venomous? And at that time, no one knew anything. Nobody knew anything. He goes, no, it's not venomous at all. So I'm like, okay, cool. And I pull it out. I'm checking it out. And I'm like, wow. And my wife grabs a picture of me at that time. And I'm just like in this stupor of falling in love and being blown away at the same time. Like that thing, and it was almost, you've seen pictures of it. It's almost solid yellow, and the tail, instead of going black, goes to like an army green instead. And that just seems to be that region's variant look. But that thing blew me away. Then I got back to the States, and Gavin's like, so you want to check out my Susties? I'm like, no, screw your Susties. I'm getting sulfurous. This is my new goal. This is it, man. These things are amazing. And he didn't really care. But then because I reached out to a bunch of guys I knew, and Bill Albright being the number one guy in the whole situation, I reached out to everybody. Nobody had any leads on him. I reached out to him. I'm like, Bill, I'm looking for a sulfurus. 1, that's a species. 2, Peruvian locality if it can happen. And then 3, the smallest, youngest animals I can get. You think that's a possibility? He's like, let me ask, man. I know some guys. So he puts the word out, and then I think it was 6 weeks later on Ben Siegel's page, up pops a pair of Sustes sulfurus captive born babies from Peru. I'm down. Absolutely. Snatch them up, buy them. No, they're Pacillonotus. And I had them labeled as Peruvian Pacillonotus, but they would be a different species than what's in Costa Rica, and look nothing like Costa Ricans. Not Shropshire eye.
Polylepis.
Thank you. But these things, for all the world, look like Costa Rican Pacillonotus. And then after that, a bunch of other people got them in. The guy out in Vegas got in a couple sulfurus, and then he posted pictures on King Snake and their Pacillonotus. So I contacted him, hey man, that's not what they are. This is what they are, but I'll still take them. So I ended up amassing a pretty good collection of Pacillonotus, because the ones Siegel's posted before he ever posted pictures of them, I bought them. I'm like, yeah absolutely. That's 110% what I want. I'm buying it. I'll see what they look like when they get here. And then I didn't get my hands on any until John Anderman, the great John Anderman, in his process of accumulating all of the Tamaulipas locality Mexicanus, contacted a guy down here in Florida, Tom Davis, not related to any other Tom Davises, and doesn't have an online presence. So unless you live here, you don't know him.
Unless you know sulfurus, you don't know him.
No, there's a few other Tom Davises in the hobby, but none of them are him. But he's a school teacher down here. He, I guess, told John that he had a clutch of sulfurus on the ground, and I think there were 12 in the clutch maybe, and we bought everyone he made available. I think it was 8 or 10 of them that he made available. Gavin, myself, and John bought them all. And then I think John ended up with your animal. I got 2.2. Gavin got, I think he had 2.2. I think it was 8 that we had got. And Gavin traded one of his to John, one of the females. So I think that's a female you have now, isn't it? Did you get a female from John?
I got a female from John, but it wasn't a female.
Well, it's a different story. That was from Gavin. I didn't sex that one.
but that was the one that Tom had hatched. Yeah. And so I got it, and so to flesh that story out, I hatched that clutch from that wild caught female, in 2007. And back then I knew Gavin and John, we were messaging each other all the time, but I didn't know you. And, but then obviously I left the hobby. All those babies I had, I dispersed. I sent a handful out to various people. And
were you ever able to locate any other one of those besides that one male? Yeah.
Nope. So I sent a pair, or it was either a pair or a trio to Nate King, including that male. And that male was like the standout from the clutch. I remember it was just like the nicest one. But they had, none of them had fully gone through the color change yet, but it was obvious, like this one's got a lot of yellow. And so when Nate, I guess, left the hobby, he ended up sending that male to John. I don't know what happened to the female I sent Nate. I'm assuming it died at some point, along with all the others, because they're just not around. But so then John got this female from Tom Davis to pair with that male that I had hatched. And 10 years later, literally, or 11 years later, I reemerge, and I'm like, I want to start keeping snakes again. Is anybody working with sulfurus? Because that's the only thing I've been thinking about this last decade about keeping that I miss. I find you. You're like, yeah, I know John. And reconnect me with John. And John's like, Roy, it's amazing timing. I'm like, literally just decided that I'm ready to let go of these sulfurus because I can't get them to breed. And I'm like, great. So he sends them to me. And after a few months, I'm like, you couldn't get them to breed because they're both males.
I love John, but he's not much for sex and snakes.
That's pretty funny. He was like, oh, it's like, yeah, that actually makes sense. So then that's been that set me, into the saga that I've been on, getting wild caught females and getting them established, all that stuff. But I love it. I think it's hilarious that that part of that same clutch, it's a lot of your animals came from.
Snakes are lame, bro. No, I'm just
What do you got to say about all this, Phil?
No. Listen, hey, I am well on my way to breeding snakes for the first time. Okay, y'all might not know, but I got my first snake egg recently. It's a total fluke. From a while.
Very little to do with it, though.
I had about as little to do with it as you can possibly imagine. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just smartass. Just playing. Keep going. Sorry, don't mind me.
Well, yeah, no. So we reconnect, Roy. Like you sent a bunch of emails to me, like I was some old man. You're very respectful. Thank you for that. That's like making me feel old. But that's just how I communicate when I don't know somebody. Yeah, I'm like, who is this guy? He's like, wait, I know who this is. He wrote the one article out there on sulfurous.
Yeah.
So yeah,
when I was 16.
But I've read him a couple times, and then Michael Barrera at Snakes and Sunset, he's had his hand in. He imports a ton of stuff that other people get credit for along the way. Like end of the day, most of the stuff comes through his hands. That's really cool from South America. And I actually, what's ironic about him is I did not realize when I moved back down here, I started communicating with him and did not realize at all that he used to work at one of the places I used to go in and buy animals on wholesale back in the day. And he was just this little geeky little 16-year-old then. So it was just like another one of those kind of weird things. But he contacted me and said, hey, I've got a couple of these sulfurous that you deal with, a green one and a red one. Do you want them? I'm like, any idea? Are they male or female? Or because you hear people say they got a red or a green one, and that really it's like the ones that what's his name in Vegas had. Vegas, what was his name? Vegas Billy or something? Or
yeah. I know what you're talking about.
Where it's a tan animal with a little bit of blushing, a pink or something. Not what I got from
like
him.
Red. Yeah.
But basically, he was so fed up that he didn't have time himself to go down and deal with the animals himself, and his employee was terrified of him, and he was just fed up with it. And I'm like, well, can you get me pictures? He goes, no, that's a problem. I can't. What I can do is I can send you the animals if you want them. I'm like, all right, man. So like, what are you looking for on them? I'm not really kind of broke right now. It's like $150. I'm like, all right, how much is shipping going to be? He's like, no, that's shipped. You're just getting the fuck out of here. I'm so sick of these things. So he shipped me these animals. I opened the bag and I about shit myself with how stunning the animal was. It was that original red animal with that, yellow orange head, the deep red tail. And it was just like, whoa, this thing's amazing. And the other one was in fact green. Like it was 100. Like he did not mince his words or get anything wrong. It was exactly what he said it was. Just nobody that he had working for him could handle the animals, and they were kind of jerkish, and they were 6-7 foot long. So I see it. And now knowing that they potentially are venomous, probably good to get them out of there. But I was absolutely thrilled. They got a couple good seasons out of that male, and then he unfortunately died, like most of the wild caughts end up doing. And thankfully, I've got the production that I just posted pictures of the other day.
Yeah,
the finally a red to red pairing.
Let's go.
Yeah, that's gonna be the thumbnail for the episode or something. I gotta post that snake so everyone can see it, because that is just an amazing animal. That's that, and that female too is kind of unique, right? Because she also has the black Is
Right.
that and she's the only one, right?
Yeah, the rest of them all basically look like they're hypomelanistic reds.
Yeah.
And this one has black in it. And that was just kind of like the oddball of the 4 I kept. I sent a couple over to Sven over in Europe. And he hasn't produced anything with the reds. He did last year, I think. He produced red to yellow. So he's got the same success I've had, but the red to red, I think actually it was 2 years ago he did that. So I don't know. I don't think he's done red to red over there because our animals are the same age. I got the striped animals from him in trade for the red sulfuris because we had no stripes in this country, and then striped tiger rats. That is, the striped tiger rats coming from Nicaragua after I already had these for years. That was a kick in the pants, but I'm thrilled, dude. It's for as bad as my year's been, the highlights have been massive highlights. So I'm not going to be doing big money this year with a ton of blackheads or anything, but I'm going to be personally happy. If anything comes out different with the red to red pairing, there's going to be a bunch of holdbacks there. And I only got 6 eggs on the Mexicanus, and I'm going to hold back 2.2 of them. So it's even what I produce, I'm not going to be able to really be selling much of anything unless it's just more reds, which it could be.
Yeah. I'm really curious to see what that pairing reveals, especially just not knowing exactly what those reds are, if it's like hypos or what. I mean, it seems like it's something because they do look different even out of the egg, right?
Yeah.
They look lighter, right?
Yeah. Instead of being gray on gray, they're like tannish on gray saddles. So I do have some pictures of them up on.
That's different.
Yeah. And the thing is, people don't, when I try to post pictures of them, people are like, nah. I bring them to shows, they're like a little different, but I couldn't even, I was trying to sell some right away because I needed the money at the time. I'm like, I really want to sell these guys, but I'm asking top dollar for them. And everybody who was interested in them was like, nah, there's nothing special there. I'm not doing it. So people had opportunities in this country to get in on them that first year, and they passed. And this year, if I have success, I'm probably going to try to push them to Europe or to Asia just to keep the numbers down in the U.S. One more time. Just makes a bit more sense if I can sell them the same speed or maybe a little bit longer to hold on them, but get the same or better money going to Europe or Asia with them, and then keep the numbers down in this country. Also, people I don't think appreciate them as much in this country as they do. Like I've had a lot of Europeans reach out to me since I posted that clutch. I think everybody who asked for them, a couple people in this country asked for them, but a bunch of people asked for them in Europe, and it hasn't hit Asia yet for whatever reason.
Yeah, interesting.
What do you think that's about? What do you think? What do you think is it? Do you think it's just like different cultures, different demands, like different people are more interested in certain things based on where you are? Like, what do you think that's what's going on there?
I think they have a whole different style of keeping there. Like one of the guys over there, you probably know his name, Roy. I can't think of it. He's got a walk-in tiger rat enclosure with like 3 tiger rats. Yes.
Yeah, Roman.
Things to aspire to. Your caging, his caging, that things to aspire to. I'm doing them U.S. style, and I've had good success with them with that. But I would still love to see that big walk-in thing. But I think the Europeans have a little bit more willingness to keep fewer animals in larger enclosures, and these things. So sulfuris, according to the books. According to people that imported them back in the 80s and early 90s, they exceed 12, 13, and up to 14 feet in length. I think your big male is up around 12, right, Roy?
Yeah, he's over 11 at this point. But obviously I can't get a tape measure on him, but he's got to be, he's over 11 because he's in an 8 foot by 3 foot enclosure, and he can do an L, with his body in there fully stretched out, with some tail left over.
That's a big beast. And people in this country don't know how they could put that in a rack. I mean, I've refused sales to people that want to put them in racks, but most of the hobby in this country, I mean, there is definitely a change happening. The cleanup crew, caging, that kind of became its own little weird niche / cult thing. So I'm not, but I'm not going to complain about the fact that they're going in the right direction of getting away from racks. Like, thank you for letting me know that everything be kept in a rack, but really, no, not everything should be kept in a rack, especially not visually oriented animals that are definitely intelligent. They definitely see and know things when they're definitely interactive when you walk in the room and they recognize you. I'm not putting those in a rack. So
yeah,
I'm thankful that there's people that are going that route. It's just, I mean, I'm just old and I don't want to do the cleanup crew setup. Like, just clean your cages and do your thing. But
yeah, you don't have to.
I'm not gonna argue with the where it's going, which is in the right direction, in my opinion. But anyway, to the point of your question, Phil, I think the Europeans have a more willingness to go to those extreme cage sizes and enjoy what they're presenting themselves with. You know, have a single giant enclosure in their living room with a single or a pair of giant snakes that are living there. Americans, I mean, with the advent of the racks and then the advent of the giant snake keepers and boa keepers putting their animals in those racks, it made people convinced that everything smaller than them can fit in even smaller racks, myself included. The first couple of years I was breeding blackheads, I was putting the newborn babies into 6-quart tubs because that was a baby rack and they were babies. Yeah. The fact that they're 24 inches long or whatever they are didn't play into my mindset at all until I looked at Australian keepers and they had them all in bigger, not quite 41 quart, the Vision, was it the V? I would say V18 short, the V28 short, I think it is what I use for them now. And even that's probably too small for them, but they do well for me there. So that's what I'm setting them up in. But I don't know. I'm not a fan of racks, but I use racks. So I'm absolutely hypocritical. But I try not to use racks on animals that are staying long term, that are going to be breeders outside of milk snakes that seem to do okay in them, and some king snakes, but even those I don't like.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to deny the utility of them, especially if you're breeding stuff, especially if you need a lot of temporary housing because you have a bunch of babies that are only going to be around for a few months or whatever. It's like, it's pretty hard to compete with the utility of a rack in that regard. You know, it's like, I don't have any racks here, but the only reason for that is because I have such a small volume that I'm producing, you know, and so I can avoid it. But it's like, I'm not making any money producing in small volumes either. You know, so it's a whole thing in and of itself. But I definitely, I would struggle to put sulfurious in the rack. It's just, I can't see it. You know, they're just such, like you say, visually oriented, inquisitive, alert snakes.
Me bringing them today to Tinley and me putting a high price tag on them at Tinley led to a few other guys that are big time reptile people out there to think they should get some. And all of them went into racks, and none of them, to my knowledge, have been successful reproducing them.
Yeah.
So some of those animals are coming back on the market as long-term captive after being stuffed in a rack where they didn't do well. And now they're being flipped to some other poor person who's going to find out that this big name breeder that sells mostly wild caught snakes nowadays, it seems, maybe set you backwards, and you would be better off at this point, I think, getting a fresh import than one that's already failed in captivity for a while. Failed to thrive.
Totally. Yeah, that's a hard thing it's hard to dig yourself out of that hole.
So I have a sort of peripheral, I suppose. even though it does feel like it's sort of in line with this particular part of the conversation. Considering you've been in the game for longer than either Roy or myself, based on your experience thus far, sort of within herpetoculture, what are some things that you think contribute to an individual species or genus of animal kind of taking off or catching like a wave of popularity or a wave of attention in the trade? Because I've been thinking a lot about how like how certain individual animals seem to, based on timing or the appearance of a mutation or something. I mean, who the hell knows? All of a sudden, everybody wants them, or everybody's working with them, or everybody's paying attention to them, right? And then I think about, like Ron and all the work he's put into the various nidanoles and getting those things rolling and seeing that people are sort of following suit. So based on, I mean, I know this maybe like it's not a very well-formed question, but I guess like based on what I'm saying, how would you interpret that? Yeah.
Yeah, I got you. No, so what has Ron done well? He's taken an animal that's gorgeous, and he's talked about it with sincere interest and passion, and he's taken that animal and made it interesting to other people because he's interested in it. Ron's absolutely a personality. Yeah. But even excluding that, and Heather also has posted a crap ton of them, of the pictures and everything. They post them together, and it's if you watch what they do, it's a pretty militant, well planned out campaign to present those animals to the masses. And that's really what it is you need to. It's something new. So you got a bunch of people in the hobby who've never seen them before. Sure. So it's something new. So that's a plus. And then it's beautiful, another plus. And then someone's having success with it, another plus. And that person happens to be a personality type that you're drawn to, another plus. So you build on all that stuff. Sulfurous, I mean, I posted the crap out of Sulfurous when I first got into them. I've burned myself out on social media the last 5-6 years where I'm not posting anywhere near as much as I used to. It seems like the way that Facebook ran the groups made the groups less active. So all the different little groups on Facebook are less active. But at one time, that was the thing: is you go into arboreal colubrids that I started, or large and unusual colubrids, and you find the people that are posting about sulfurous or crebos or whatever that niche is, and then you find something else that's peripheral to that. The Tyus that came in thanks to Dan at DM Exotics. Yeah. And it's a new iconic looking animal. So it gets that interest. And then, here's a morph to it. So let's pop that up in value. And now people want to jump in on it. And same with Sulfurous. People saw the value I put on them and decided they wanted to get in on them without really learning about them. The individuals in question got in because they were money guys. And that's also why they're selling them. They haven't been successful. They don't set them up right. Whereas the guys who are truly interested and they aren't there because the money's there, but because they're interested in it and they're willing to pay the money anyway. That's the people who are going to be successful with any of these things that are a little more niche. What makes animals successful, to your point though, is they have to be easy. So there's easy animals. They're your corns, your kings, your milks, your balls, your bearded dragons. And then there's animals that have that one extra thing about them that they need to be successful with them. You need to do a little bit extra. And those are a little less popular. Why? Because people fail with them. People don't like to fail. This hobby is built on the Dunning-Kruger effect. Everybody comes in here with no knowledge, and then all of a sudden they're an expert in 6 months. And that's that. You have to be able to be successful with your animal. Otherwise, you feel like you're not successful, and it takes away from that drive to act like you are successful. It's
so. I guess, I mean, I apologize. I'm not trying to cut you off. I just think I think I am fascinated by this particular topic because like part of it is probably that I just, haven't been around long enough to know or to have seen lots of big trends. I've seen some, and I've been present and an active participant in some, but it's something that really genuinely makes me curious, because I definitely, I don't disagree with you at all that some amount of it is like just setting a good example, right? Showing that you can care, showing a particular group of animals in the right light with nice quality photos, showing how cool they can be, showing how beautiful they are. Like there's so much that alone goes such a long way. You know, it can take you so far in terms of making other people interested in what you're doing, and because I come from the art world, there's also an element of like, I remember hearing people say all the time this term of like minimum viable audience, right? So it's like I don't care what kind of art you make, there's probably like a minimum number of people who are interested in your artwork. If like I went to college with a girl who would make her living and pay her rent. She was a phenomenal illustrator, like a very, very good illustrator. And she would make her living every couple of weekends going to furry conventions and drawing artwork for furries. And she would, admittedly, she hated it. Like she hated making the artwork because it's not her scene. But at the same time, she was making a killing. She would make 10 grand a convention just making stupid artwork, just stupid furry artwork, And
that's niche.
Yeah, that's niche as fuck, dude. And it baffles me because that's true. I don't doubt that that's true. That there's a Immortal Technique. He's a rapper, and he jokingly in one of his tracks says, "There's a market for everything. There's a market for chocolate covered cockroaches." Like, come on, you can get enough people interested in something. I guess I feel like there's a big delta between there is a market for whatever it is you're talking about. And I don't mean market purely in economic terms. I just mean market in terms of interest. There's a market purely in economic, there's this market for whatever you want. And then over here is like achieving that market saturation or that market interest. There's all this shit in between, right? There's this huge delta of time and effort in between. And I don't know how I feel, I don't know how I feel about that. Like, is it just a matter of posting enough photos and showing enough people how cool it is? Like what kind of boon has herpetoculture seen as a result of social media? Yeah, of course. I mean, everybody will go on and on at length about how incredible it is that, if you go back pre-internet, people were calling each other on the phone and taking out ads in the back of Reptiles magazine and like doing their local herp society and you name it. And that's awesome. Absolutely, absolutely awesome. But surely we wouldn't have herpetoculture as it is today without the internet. I mean, there's something special about what the internet and the interconnectedness of our world that something special that's done to our industry in particular. Right. But maybe that's a separate topic. Anyway. Yeah. Sorry. Go for it.
Like you're saying that the reptile community has always found a way, for another Jurassic World quote for you there, life will find a way. Herps will find a way because, like you said, people were going to the herp societies, and that's what made herp societies massive.
Yeah.
I mean, CHS had 3,000 plus members at one point, and they were trading articles, books, and animals.
Right.
And then when they opted to eliminate the animals from the meetings, they lost half their membership overnight.
Mm-hmm.
So that, where there's a way to trade animals, and that's the crazy thing is when you're trading animals, you get people who are in it because they love the animals. And you got guys who are in it because they know a way to make some money that's easy, that's not quite illegal. Now, they're going to make it illegal with, how they do stuff.
Like you said, not quite.
I mean, I've walked out of some shows like a drug dealer with pockets full of cash that if we got stopped, like that's a concern. Like, How am I going to convince a cop that I just made all this cash at a reptile? What'd you say, son? A what?
A what?
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 But we've always found a way to do stuff as a reptile community. But yeah, no, the internet's definitely played a huge role in being able to find stuff like what I think it was actually Roy, I think, that introduced me to the idea of going and looking at Instagram for different photos of things with the sulfurus, trying to find, what I now call Instagram herping, where you just go search different areas and different regions for different animals through finding different keywords.
I love that.
You can find so much stuff out that way. So yeah, the internet's been amazing for us.
Yeah.
Like to find out what the locals in Brazil call a tiger rat or a sulfurus or whatever you're looking for, and then search that tag and see what happens and see what you come up with. And you get some interesting stuff that way. So it's we're in a good time.
Yeah. No. I mean, I guess I love that idea of Instagram herping. I feel like that's me all day. I'm hooked on Instagram. God, it's obnoxious. I hate it.
Well, I'm sure what's a term they call Euromastics over in the Middle East? I'm sure they don't call them Euromastics.
Yeah, they call them DAB, D-A-B or D-A-B-B. And I'm looking them up. I'm looking up DAB all the time. It's sick. It yields a lot of good shit. It can,
Careful.
What about the
dabs? Isn't that something in the drug world?
Dab. That's funny. I
didn't even think about that.
I didn't even put that two together. Yeah, that's shows to go kind of a nerd.
So you've got a building that has a extremely high electric bill, and you search a dab all the time, huh?
And it's okay. He lives in Colorado.
Thankfully, in Colorado, that's legal, my man. So we're good. we're good. No, it's interesting. I mean, it's just something that I think about all the time because, I feel like there have been many, many examples of animals that I've only become interested in because I've seen people showing them in their best light, and then that kind of gets me interested in the idea of being able to do that myself, and here we are talking about stupid ass purchases that I've made over the last 3 months just to try something new for the sake of it. But sandfish. I bought sandfish, sir. I don't know why, but I have them, and they're badass. Real
they
cool.
Are. And their biggest negative is that they came in for less than $1 a piece for the longest time, and then there's like a whole niche of people who are like, oh, those used to be cheap, but that's what they say about tiger rats and other things too. So
but the same thing.
Cool.
Same thing with euros. Same thing with euros, man.
Yeah.
Like, People used to say, well, I've had people come to me and say, oh, I want to get an ornate. What's the price? And I'm like, well, they're $5.50 each. And then they're like, I used to buy those things for $100 a piece, $75 a piece. I'm like, yeah, cool. Gas used to be 69 cents a gallon. I don't give a shit.
Yeah.
You have any idea what it takes to breed these goddamn things? Like fucking goddamn it, Well,
at the same time that those were that price, mollies were $5 to $20 a piece.
Yeah.
So they were 75 to 150. They were always higher priced.
They're gone. Nobody has them.
Yeah.
No, like I got 2 friends that have Molly Euromastics,
Oh, really?
Yeah. They just don't exist. And I mean, part of now we're really getting into a tangent here, but we're getting to a point now with Euromastics where I think we're going to start seeing a reduction in the total number of species present in the trade, but probably an expansion in the availability of those specific species. So, and which is probably for the better in some regard, like for a little while we had Euromastics dispar flavofasciata, Euromastics dispar maliensis, Euromastics dispar. Fuck, dude, we don't need all of them. Like we just, and it doesn't mean that they don't have a place here. It doesn't mean that there's not some subset of Euromastics nerds, myself included, that will appreciate those animals. It's just to say that, like, I think that there's a point at which there are real ethical concerns that brush up against the desire to have something for nerd purposes only. Like there's a point where those two things are going to brush up against one another. And it's like, how many times are you really going to produce Uromastyx dispar to spar if you have such a small number of people who can even tell the difference between those and a Uromastyx dispar maliensis? They look so goddamn similar. I can barely tell the difference. And it's if it's the case, what's the why? Why do you need to have both? Right? I mean, how many species of bearded dragon do we have in the trade? 3. And only one of those has any real level of saturation or establishment, right? And the other 2 are probably just auxiliaries as a result of the existing Viticeps trade, right? And again, maybe that's not a great example of how to bring a group of animals forward into herpetoculture long term. Maybe there's something to be said for having more species of Uromastyx present in the trade and allowing that to, build out a certain kind of popularity. Anyway, sorry.
As they get fewer, they become more desirable because of the rarity, and the rarity breeds price increase, and price increase and breeds interest.
Sure.
Interest breeds breeding, and then they drop in price, and people drop out of them, and it cycles and cycles.
Yeah.
So,
sorry. Anyway, and now sandfish. I'm going to get those sandfish to breed. Well, I mean,
sandfish, Schneider skinks. There's a bunch of them.
I also have Schneider skinks. I literally, at the same time that I bought the sandfish, I bought a mess of Schneider skinks. Dude,
they're awesome.
They're really, really cool. Like they're the stupidest. They're these cheap. Nobody cares about them because they're $20. Nobody gives a shit. But I'm like, no, sir. These are really, really interesting animals. They're really bizarre. They're really unique. They have the same kind of environmental requirements as Uromastyx with some light variation in there. So they fit right into my space here. They're like an easy plug-in. And further, both of those animals, both Schneiders and sandfish, with sandfish, I haven't seen any evidence. I mean, I'm sure they're out there. I'm not saying it's never happened, but I haven't seen any evidence of anybody actually breeding those things in captivity, for starters. And with the Schneiders, I've only seen like 3 or 4 examples of people who have hatched them and the babies are alive. Like 3 or 4. And I'm sure there's more out there than I'm aware of. I'm not saying I know, but
when they were imported heavily, like, everybody gets lucky with the gravid females coming in.
Yeah. Right. And so surely some of them are going to be produced in captivity. But my point is just to say, you never know. Like it's those animals now that people take for granted because they're coming in for $20 a piece from Egypt. And in 10 years, nobody can find them. Where have all the sandfish gone? I ask you. No. Sorry.
I had Mark Bell come up to me at Tinley when I had Sulfuris out, and he walked up and he's like, it was actually one of the cooler moments, because I don't know if you know who Mark Bell is, but he's one of the biggest reptile money movers in the world, really.
So,
and he's also just a really good, down to earth animal guy. At the end of the day, he just likes animals. Happens to make a bunch of money doing it, but he just likes animals. So he came up to me at Tinley and was like, from across the room, he's like, "What the fuck is that?" I'm like, "What?" It's that time it was Susi Sulfuris, and he's like looking at it all confused. I'm like, "You want to hold it?" He goes, "No, I've held enough snakes in my time. I just don't recognize the animal, and that doesn't happen very often." And I start explaining, it's South American, gets imported, usually big and nasty, and just the animal I had in my hand was not. And he's like, "Oh, okay, yeah, I must have imported them," but because they were also cheap when they came in back in the day, because no one wanted them, they were king cobra food.
Totally.
He didn't really pay attention to them either.
Yeah, sure.
And it's like Chironius now that come in and some people are starting to jump on that. That's not I don't think that's a great hobby animal, because they're going to be really specialist feeders, but if you can get them figured out, then maybe.
Right.
Yeah.
But Sulfuris just have been something that grabbed me from the first time I ever held one. So that's that. I'm thrilled with what I got going on with them at this point.
You should be.
And
yeah, I mean, there's something just enigmatic about them, for those of us who get it. I think especially if you've seen one face to face, it's like they're impressive. Like I wish I need to take that big male that I have to like a show. I think that John used to take him to the super shows.
Yeah, he did. And people would tell me, "Oh yeah, I held one of those things. It was amazing." Your sound dropped out.
Oh, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep. Okay. Anyway, he's just a beast of a snake. So
yeah,
that's a good ambassador.
The one I saw in Peru, what I held him, he was completely calm and just puppy dog in hand. Let him go back into the enclosure, and it was like a 3x3x3 cube that they kept him in. That was just wood with regular window screen for the enclosure, and then a big tub on the bottom that they had filled with water, and a few branches above the water for him to hang out on. And then because they had a school group come in, they threw a few mice in there so the kids could see the thing eat. And then, like I said, a 9-10 foot animal eating mice. And I swear it bit on one of the little mice, and like a shot of blood shot out of the mouse across the room. And I'm like, I was just holding that thing. Holy crap. What the hell? What kind of jaw pressure these things have?
So rad, dude.
Yeah.
But since then, I've been bit
a
ton of times. I've been bit, and I've never, it's never been excruciating. Like I always hear that Crebos can be a really excruciating bite. It's never been a super powerful bite.
No, my experience getting bit by him too is that like I've never really had one like really try and give it to me, like really lash on and give me hell. It's like usually a pretty quick, just like whap, and let go, which I think is part of it. I don't think I would enjoy it very much if they really wanted to give you hell, especially with the compounds in there that we're learning more about.
Well, Ron's pretty susceptible to venoms, I guess, but he got hit by one. His thumb and his arm, I think, swelled up, and he just didn't. He had a bunch of cold washes running across his body where he was feeling sick to his stomach. I've got hit a couple times. I mean, more than a couple, but I've been hit where I know I've gotten envenomated a few times, and it's been itchy. Yeah. And one time it was like a slight bee sting and some localized swelling, but it's not. Yes, they're venomous. I definitely see that, but it's never been something where I went, oh wow, now I'm in trouble. It was.
Yeah.
Hognose are worse for sure.
Dude, if hognose are worse, that's nothing.
The hognose are pretty nasty, man.
Oh, come on. I live with them out here. They're like the wimpiest. I'm just playing. I've never been bit by hognose. I'm just jacking around.
No, but people think because they're so dopey looking that they're fine to mess with, and then they let them chew on them, and their whole arm swells up to their shoulder, and they go to the doctor or they go to the ER. Like, oh, what happened? Well,
that's the problem too. Is they have such a feeding response. It's like they're trying to eat you.
Yeah.
It's like that's even true with the tricolor hogs. They're totally unrelated snakes. Taxonomically and everything, but like my female tricolor, I call her the sandworm, like the sandworm from Beetlejuice, because like you touch the sand in her substrate and she's just like shoots out, just going right for me, and it takes her a second to realize it's like, oh, I'm not food. And she's fine, but like I'm pretty cautious when I first go into her enclosure, even though it's like it's just a little derpy tricolor hognose snake, because I know that if she flashes onto me, she's going to try and eat me, and like that is not going to be a pleasant bite in terms of the venom.
Okay, first of all, Roy, you just said the sandworm from Beetlejuice, and let's be clear, it's from Dune, sir.
No, there's one in Beetlejuice.
No,
there's one in Beetlejuice too.
Oh, Beetlejuice is terrible. Dune, I'm just kidding. I'm really into Dune. And especially right now, the movies are coming out. Man. Anyway, sorry. It's whiskey. I don't know what to tell you.
I had one to loosen up, and that was it.
It's not to go off the rails.
Listen, I'm a lightweight. This is literally the one I only had one. I'm just a wiener. Anyway, sorry, I'm getting off into the rails here. No offense. I'm just saying you got to respect Dune. That's where Beetlejuice got it from. God damn it. But
maybe so, but the one in Beetlejuice works better because it's also like a banded like snake creature.
yeah,
Like
true. I know. Yeah. All right.
And it's in, yeah. So anyway.
All right.
Anyway,
fine.
on topic of sulfurious, I've only actually had one sulfurious bite that actually felt like it was anything in terms of venom. And it was the trippy thing about it was that, so I had like localized swelling. She bit me on the thumb, like this digit here.
Yeah.
And like my hand swelled up a little bit and the thumb swelled up a little bit. It wasn't terrible. It wasn't like it was a balloon or anything, but I was like, oh, that's something. But then the trippy part about it that I noticed was that for 2 weeks following that bite, I had joint pain in the joint upstream of that bite.
Well, it's supposed to be the two's focused venom with lizard and bird as the two focuses.
Yeah.
So that's one of the reasons I started doing quail. I'm breeding the hell out of quail in anticipation of these guys, because I'm just going to be throwing button quail to the newborn sulfurous. I did it last year. I just had a small group last year that hatched out and they took off on them, and then eventually jump over to Conturnix quail. But that's just been my thing. I got a freezer full that I got to sell some off. I'm like up to 1,500 of each, I think, right now.
Oh man. I'll get some more from you soon. I'm almost out of the buttons already because I'm feeding all the sulfurious though. But
are you?
I think that I feel like that also is part of the thing with like you've spoken before, I know, about how fast they eat, and it's like that makes a lot of sense for something that's raiding bird nests, because you want to get those hatchlings down before mom comes and pecks your eyes out.
Well, I'm sure, I know you've seen, I'm sure Phil hasn't, the woodpecker versus snake video on YouTube.
Yeah.
That should have been assigned homework before the class today.
I agree.
Yeah.
If you haven't,
I'll get it in the chat here.
If you haven't already seen it, that's definitely worth seeing. But yeah, that shows you how ineffective they are with adult birds. That thing had that bird in his mouth 5-6 times and didn't have any idea what to do with himself or herself.
Yeah, that's true.
Fascinating. Yeah, send me the thing in the chat, Roy. Let's see it.
I'm sending it to you.
Away.
Here it is.
I made a Ron meme in the chat, Jason, if you care to take it.
I don't even know for the chat here.
Zoom.
It'll probably highlight when I send this over. But
I see chat down here. Just made you guys bigger.
The Ron meme is pretty good. We're gonna have to post that to the gram.
Yeah.
Ron.
Sure. No, I sent it to him already, and he told me. He told me to tell Jason.
Oh, that I did. I did see this, but I didn't know what it was.
Yeah. Now you know. He said, "Tell him I heard his blackhead is fat."
Yeah. So what's this all about? What's this? Is that related to this shirt at all? The team hood.
Hell yeah,
fat blackhead pythons.
Yeah.
What's all this about? We got to talk blackheads a little bit.
I had somebody come up to me in Daytona and express that their somewhat neighbor was talking shit about me, and that I feed my blackheads too much, and just that we're not friends, or somebody made an enemy of me that I had not considered whatsoever. And I was just sitting there having a couple drinks at Daytona after like Friday or Saturday night, and the guy just said, "Hey man, I'm just so you know, I'm Team Hood." I'm like, all right. I didn't know we were at that stage, but I want to make a fucking shirt.
Yes.
So yeah, no. Every podcast, it's got to be on exhibit.
Oh,
It's got blackhead patterning inside there. It's getting dark here, so it's harder to see. But somebody just told me they were on Team Hood because the individual is running his mouth. Didn't really have a leg to stand on in the conversation when it comes to blackheads, and he thought it was a ridiculous thing to decide that he knows what he's doing more than I do when I've produced more in a season and he has in his entire career breeding them.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's and it's just the whole hobby right now is going, and we do have obese snakes in the hobby, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it's, if you want your females to breed, they need enough fat to be able to breed. They need enough body fat to know that they're in good enough condition to make it through breeding. Blackheads in particular have a huge amount of energy they put into their eggs with giant eggs. My males are lean little screwing machines, and the females are a little heftier because they lose so much when they drop their eggs and they go through it. But it's if you listen to any podcast on blackheads, the idea is now becoming so ingrained in people who don't even keep the animals that if you feed them adult rats, they're going to die. That people frequently say, "Oh yeah, we'll only live to 6 years old." None of my animals have ever died prematurely. My oldest animals are from 2004 right now. So approaching 20 years of age, still reproductively active. Yes, people who have strong personalities can say a lot of things when they get on to podcasts and explain how everything's going to die. But if you're that's an extreme. If you're keeping your animals too obese, then yeah, sure, they can die from obesity. If you're keeping your animals heavy enough to be reproductively active, they'll be fine. So
I definitely, sorry.
It's a swing from like I always keep saying, it's like in the 90s, you saw people, they had boas that were that big around, like as big around as your thigh.
Yeah.
If you're not watching.
Yeah.
And those are some of the top boa breeders in the world. And then the boas breed a couple times and they die. Absolutely. That's morbidly obese. But having an animal that has proper body weight, if you don't know what proper body weight is, go out in the wild, see what wild snakes look like, and realize they're a little lean, give them a little bit heavier than that, and they're golden. Should they be exactly like the wild? Probably not, because they're probably not getting every feeding opportunity they can in the wild. Should they be 4 times thicker than the wild type? Absolutely not. But there's, like politics, we've gone from one extreme to the other. Back the other way again. It's like there's a happy median here we can survive in, and we can have communication in, and we can have animals live in, that is between all of these extremes.
I think pendulum swings.
Yeah, I feel like this speaks right to my heart at the moment. I mean, I feel like, you said it best for there. Where people will say, "Oh, should it be exactly like the wild type?" Well, no, because it's also just not the same animal. We're in a completely different context, like there's a
hopefully your animal doesn't have parasite loads. Hopefully it's not missing meals.
Yeah. It's not under threat from predators. Like, I mean, there's so many things that are just not in the picture when we're keeping stuff here, I feel like, you also mentioned this a little bit earlier, with talking about how you think, or at least maybe not well, maybe the better way to say it is you were mentioning how some of the younger crowd coming up being more interested in non-rat keeping, having a cleanup crew, the whole scene, right? And how that's probably a good thing, and how that's probably, probably speaks very well for the future of what we do. And I think,
to be very clear, you don't put words in my mouth. I do not think any new keeper should have a rack. At all. Every new keeper should have caging, but reptile caging, not an aquarium, not a fish tank, a reptile enclosure. The appropriate enclosure for the species they're keeping, whether it's screen topped in glass or PVC, so they can see their animal, so they can know what the animal's doing, and they can start to recognize behaviors in the animal, which you're never going to see in a rack.
Right.
Even front rack, you should be able to see it from across the room and be able to observe it without interacting with it and affecting it.
Right. And it, I love to see this. On the one hand, I love this big, what feels like a cultural swing towards more keeping of that variety, more, call it naturalistic, whatever you want. I mean, I don't care what term you place on it. It's nice to see. I do think that it is, to some extent, probably a pendulum swing, and it's probably the right kind. It's like if for a long time we had a substantial number of people who were all keeping in this one homogenous, medicalized kind of way of keeping, it's probably good for it to swing back a little bit more towards this other end of the spectrum. And then hopefully it'll swing we'll find maybe a happy medium somewhere between the two, at least broadly, generally speaking, because I'm not convinced that, I feel like I made a post not long ago about this on my Instagram, which is, I feel like there is a little bit of danger of falling into the trap of the naturalistic fallacy too, with some of that line of thinking too, which is to suggest that just because something is evolved or natural or in the wild, that it's good, somehow inherently good. And that's obviously not true, it's, there's probably some middle ground to be struck here. And I'm obviously not, go ahead. Sorry.
I'm just thinking for sulfurous, that's an animal that in the wild is cruising. They're getting around, they're finding what they can, where they can, and they're moving. And they're going in and out of niches, and I think even Uromastics are going to have their rock pile, but they're going to be cruising in and around that as well. Yeah, and we can have an idea of the picture of what's there, but Sambo is one that always gets me. Sambo is people if they think naturalistic for a Sambo is keeping them on sand. No, they're in a rock pile with leaf litter, and yes, there's a sand underlay of that, but it's not soft loamy sand necessarily. There's leaf litter and whatnot they live in. Do you wonder why they got orange in their pattern? Do you think that's for sand and brown? That sounds a lot like, I don't know, leaves. It shows you right on the animal what it is. It's a leaf litter species that lives within the sand and leaf litter mix, but people go straight sand. So the fallacy point is that the idea of what is naturalistic for the animal is the issue.
Yeah.
And we get a snapshot of what they're doing. Even the species we get. There's one I did an Amazon tree boa talk one time, and I'm like, all right, here's the range, which is all of North Central South America. This huge range. And then here's the little tiny spot, Suriname and Guyana, that we get animals from. So you have this giant range, and then this one little spigot spot right here in the middle where you get stuff from. The same's true with sulfurous, same's true with a bunch of stuff, same's true with the Uromastics. They're not coming out their entire range. They're coming out of certain localities, which may or may not be what you're picturing in your head is what the locality type is like.
That's right. Right, for sure.
And for a lot of these species too, it's we don't even have enough information on them to really know a whole lot about their niche. I mean, even sulfurous, it's I'm still okay. I mean, obviously they're arboreal. Obviously they're also found on the ground, cruising through the jungle. It's but okay, what's the ratio? How often are they up in the trees? How high are they in the trees? Are they way up in the canopy? Because that's a completely freaking different world up there, And then how do we try and provide for them, in captivity? It's does it matter if they're occupying all of those different strata? Can you just keep them in one of those strata, and is that good enough? Or do they, would it be better if you had them in a canopy, canopy vivarium that had no substrate on the bottom at all, and it was just super full of light and arboreal epiphyte plants and stuff like that? We don't know.
Yeah, where are they at during the wet season? Are they near the flooded area? Are they near the dry area? Yeah, right. I went down at one time during the dry season. I don't know if the area that they saw one in is seasonally underwater. I don't think so because of what it was, but are they avoiding the heavily wet areas when it's wet? Are the different colors? Because we didn't even get into that. It seems like there's a range of colors throughout, depending on where you're at. Ecuador, they seem to have a green look to them. Peru seems to be yellow and green, and yellow and black seems to be in the Guyana, Suriname area, the Guyana Shield region. But also there's the tan ones that are in there, and the very dark ones that are in there. So they all occupying different niches with the different colors, and then the Brazilian just awesomeness that's in Brazil that we'll never get here in this country. that somebody that messaged me or posting on I don't remember which, but they were asking, are these going to be the red and black ones like these pictures he saw on iNaturalist? I'm like, I don't know, bro. Send me the picture. It's probably Brazilian animals. He said, and I'm like, yep, those are Brazilian animals. Like that.
Yep.
That was one of the
if only
internet herping things I did, where I went and found that tricolor Brazilian one with the red head. And I sent it to you and John and everybody else on the planet and posted it all over the place. I posted that thing so much that the original place it was posted took the picture down. Like they got tired of all the herpers like commenting on the picture or something. I don't know. Yeah, it was a little nature center in Brazil. Took that picture down.
Yeah, I remember the place. Yeah, that's funny. I didn't even know.
But that animal's stunning. But are those animals those different colors because they're in different niches or different?
Yeah, who knows?
Tree types or what's going on there?
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much to still learn with these things, just trying to figure out the breeding. I did, a couple years in a row, I did it no problem. And then I moved and struck out for a few years in a row and finally had some success again this year. But what exactly do they need just for breeding, which is a basic thing for them. And then all the rest of it's more stuff to find out.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be great. Like I'm not big on wild caught types, wild caught animals, rather, but I would love to see some of these other looks throughout their range show up in the U.S. at the same time. This is one of those species where I don't think we have the full genetic potential of the animal in the country right now.
No, definitely not. I mean, even of the phenotypes expressed in the guy on a shield, we don't have that yet. It's like there's all kinds of green animals. Like I still haven't seen any captive born, or bred and born green adult animals. I know you produced some greens in the past, or at least bred some, right?
Yeah, I bred a green animal to a yellow and black, and a portion of those animals came out looking a little different, but not a lot, not like the reds were. And those went to, I think, Europe and Asia. And I don't know what they look like as adults because I only have so much room for giant colubrids, so the reds won.
Yeah, totally. Understandably. But I'm curious to see what's still possible with those snakes, because there's just so much variability in them.
Yeah, we don't. I've been very careful the entire time with this red phase to call it just that, a red phase. I don't ever call it a hypo. I don't call it a genetic trait. I don't know. That's one of those things that always made me crazy in the hobby, is when people declare things. And it's usually those money guys that are out there chasing the buck who end up getting the buck. I'm probably doing things wrong, but I'd rather be morally happy with what I'm doing.
Yeah.
Declare things. I'm curious. Can you say a little bit more about what you mean there?
People that just come out and say this or that's a morph. Simple recessive morph. This is obviously a simple recessive. This is a codom. This is that. And in animals like this, where they're polygenic, more than likely, to say a different color phase is a morph in particular, is, until it's proven, I think it's pretty premature. I have had about half the babies come out red when a red to yellow pairing is done. That's why I'm really excited to see what a red to red pairing is. But then I started calling these reds before I ever saw the animals out of Brazil. So now I kind of want to back off and be like, orange red, orange, red tailed. I don't know, because those are red. Those are I didn't know that. I didn't know that color spectrum was available to this species until I saw those.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's some that are like literally just blood red.
Blood red and black banded.
Yeah, it's freaking amazing. Yeah, those are something else. But yours are still red. They still count. It's just a different kind of red.
Red tailed instead of red headed. So
yeah, there you go.
I don't know.
Maybe you'll have a bunch of just solid red ones come out of this clutch. Who knows?
To say I'm excited is an understatement. Like I said, I said when my Python season was just bombing clutch after clutch, female after female. I said to my wife and a buddy of mine, I'm like, the only thing that's really going to save me from like wanting to just burn the whole building down at this point is seeing the Mexicanus and the Sulfuris pull out, and they both of them did for me. And I'm like, that's the one thing that's going to make me happy. And yeah, no, I gotta. It's not going to be a big money year, but it's going to be a big personal success year. Sometimes,
for sure.
Yeah, and for some reason, no one feels bad for me whenever I have a clutch of Mexicanus and a clutch of Sulfuris.
Yeah, not many people could say they have that.
Yeah,
it's a pretty short list. Pretty sure it's just one guy right now.
Well, that's, I was never the first one to breed Sulfuris, but for a while I was the only one breeding them in the world, consistently. And until you produce them, I was the only one breeding them in the US. And until a couple guys produce them in Europe, there was no one else breeding them outside their native range anywhere in the world. So they're definitely not a species that's heavily worked on. So there's a lot of room and a lot of work to be done and a lot of genetics to play with. So I'm excited with these. I'm like you said, it's so unknown. It's like the Amazon tree boas where you have all these different colors that they come in, and we don't know how they work genetically. And we're in the same boat with these guys, but without seeing all the different colors pop out in single clutches like you have with Amazons. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. It seems like the different color variants have a pretty strong influence on the clutches.
Yeah.
And you can see it pretty early. So as far as
it seems like it's like there's definitely some variability though that's confusing. Like this clutch that I hatched last year, the babies are still obviously going through the change, but a lot of them have a lot of like very pronounced red banding and orange banding, which is not present on either of the adults. Like my male is black and yellow. My female's almost solid. Like she's mostly yellow and has like a olivey brown green tail. And, but I also, it's like, okay, is that just they're in this weird phase? Like, I don't know what they're actually going to look like, in
so
2
not a
years
black tail?
when they reach. A lot of them have a dark tail, but like,
I mean, your female doesn't have a black tail. She has an olive.
No, she doesn't have a black tail. It's
like
an olive tail. Yeah.
Almost like it's got some sort of hypo thing going on.
Maybe she's definitely lighter than my other female, my green one who has a black tail, but it's like, she doesn't strike me as like a hypo. Like she's got still like, some dark color in there and everything, but it's just like weird because I wouldn't expect to see those colors from those animals. But again, it's like, I don't know what to expect because I've never seen babies from that pairing up to adulthood. So who knows what they're even going to look like in a year, or 2 years. Yeah.
They'd have any of the electric blue bands on their like.
Yeah.
I wish that stayed.
I know. Those are awesome. Yeah. Same with like the yellowtail crebos. They get that electric blue, and it's like, if only that could stick around.
We can all be filled with the blue Euromastics running around.
Yeah, exactly.
I tagged you back in, buddy. I see you falling asleep.
Yeah, there you go. I'm not. Poor guy.
No. Look, I mean, this is all. It makes me really happy.
Payback.
Whoa, bro. Take it easy. Take it easy, man. No, it's nice. I mean, I think one of the things I love about doing this show is the fact that we're able to talk to so many different people who have really diverse and interesting perspectives and experiences. And I mean, just from the time we started the show to now, I mean, I've changed ways I do things at the shop. I've changed my outlook in terms of what I do, in aggregate at the shop. And I've changed my plans for what I expect to be doing or the way I think about moving forward into the future with reptiles, So, I mean, I couldn't care less if like my participation in the conversation is like massive or wholesale. I just love hearing this, and I love hearing what you guys have to say and hearing your psych on this random snake that I don't know anything about, that I just watched this awesome video of it, one trying to like nab this stupid woodpecker, and it didn't really seem to manage to grab it a few times. I mean, it's great. It's really, really fun. And especially now as I'm starting to make my foray into actually trying to breed snakes in earnest for the first time.
You're missing all the verbal content of that without, I know you have to listen to it on mute because we're all here. So the whole time the guy's like, don't shake the boat. Don't shake the boat.
No. When I have my thing, when I'm at my thing, it's not you guys aren't muted. I'm muted. So that way I don't make noise that disturbs your guys' conversation. Nice. I'm not muting you. I'm definitely not muting you guys. Not even slightly.
No. I'm saying in the video, the video. The whole time that the guy's screaming, don't shake the boat. Don't move the boat. Don't move the boat.
Oh, damn. I thought like, man,
it's such a great video, but that's another fun thing is where you can't trust anything. So when I first saw that video, it was in, I want to say it was the Brazilian Amazon the guy was in. But then that video, the caption has bounced it all over, not only all over South America, it's bounced over to Asia. Claiming that they're in Malaysia or somewhere else. And it's I don't know what snake they saying it is. Like it's funny to see these different videos or different things you see just take on their own life and become, people have to credit things that they don't know what they're talking about, but they're trying to get those shares on whatever page they're on. So it sparks interest in it. And I guess, again, that's another case where the Sulfuris forced the original poster to take down their video because you can't find the original anymore.
What a trick.
Yeah.
It's wild how that happened.
It's funny.
But I love
these
that
things
video.
just take a life of their own. Yeah. It's a classic.
But that's, I mean, but to your point, Phil, talking to people like Ron, I went over there and sat there and talked to Ron at his place, and he's just going through the animals when he sold the monitors there. And he was explaining what he was doing with stuff. And I'm just sitting back, and it was nothing to do with monitors that he was talking. I mean, he was talking about monitors, but my head, like you, I was thinking snakes. Mm-hmm. You're thinking euros, and like I'm just thinking my own stuff and just things he was saying. I'm like, oh, wait a second. And it's like, and when you talk to different herp people, even though we're not having the same exact conversation or everything necessarily what we're in our head thinking and what you're talking about, it's still some of the stuff that's being discussed, some of the tricks, techniques, whatever, can be used in different ways. So like I switched all of my nest boxes to what Ron uses for, well, what he did use for Ackies before he got rid of them, which are what you probably use for your euros, the 7 to 10 gallon totes.
Yeah.
And this year I said, screw it, let me try something different. I got the 8-foot Neodeshas. I put a tote on each end, the hot end and the cold end. Every single clutch was laid at the cold end.
Fascinating.
These years, I put them all at the hot end. I just had extras this year, so to speak. So I threw them at the cold end as well, just give an option. And they all chose the option of, I'm not going that hot with my eggs.
Yeah.
So just like, because of what Ron's saying about something he's doing, and it made me think about something else, and I'm tricking out different options. So like, just the idea that when you have smaller enclosures, you only give them one nest location.
Yeah.
How many times is egg binding a situation of a nest issue? I think Ron was talking about monitors, which are notoriously picky about their nest situations and offering multiple nest situations. And I thought, hey, why don't I try that with the snakes? And turns out, good idea. Now I know, get them away from the hot end, put them at the cold end.
Yeah. Yep. Oh yeah, for sure. I historically was using those 10-gallon Rubbermaid totes for a long time. And in the last year or two, I've opted to get the, either the next size or two sizes up from that. I think they're 25-gallon Rubbermaid totes now. Still the Husky brand, but they're just much larger. And I started using those and tracking how long, like basically tracking gestation. So how long between mating and egg laying, what the length of time was. And then also measuring like number of damaged eggs, because I started thinking for a little while, like maybe these Rubbermaid totes are too small, because especially when you're dealing with a Euromastix, like a Moroccan Euromastix or some of the larger ornates or a Flavifasciata, they're huge lizards, like like asking them to cram themselves inside of a 10-gallon Rubbermaid tote to lay an entire clutch of 20 eggs is probably not right, Yeah. And so I started doing this, and I got way, way shorter gestation by like a couple of weeks, sometimes like 2 weeks, where they lay, instead of waiting 6 weeks to lay their, 7 weeks to lay their eggs, they laid it 5 weeks, right after mating, stuff like this. So it's like, okay, maybe I'm just going to be using these larger totes now. Those larger totes also offer a wider gradient, right? Because I can stretch that tote from like across the center of the enclosure from the basking site, and then almost 2 feet onto the cold side, right? Because it's a 25-inch tote. So where are they laying most of their eggs? Like right in the center. They're not laying it so far, but they're also like clearly avoiding the hot side. They're clearly avoiding the side closest to the heat.
Where did you put the totes previously?
I would always steer them towards the warmer end, and I would always kind of go, I tried to follow the animals, so if they were digging way on the opposite end of the tote away from the heat light, I'd scoot the whole tote away from the hot side, right? I tried to do that, but it's hard when you're using a 10-gallon Rubbermaid tote. It's a tiny box. It's just not, you can't really get that much variation in a tiny box. But at the same time, it was like, well, how do I scale this? Because one of the large boxes that I'm using now, you fill that thing with sand, it weighs like 100 pounds. It's really hard to move that thing from one cage to another. So I have 5 of them, and I always have, it's me and my employee. And I'm like, okay, we're going to carry this from one cage to the next, because it's like, and maybe I'll have to get more in the future. And it's like, okay, I'll just do more deadlifts, so that way these lizards have like a little bit of time. Like, that's fine. I'm happy to do more deadlifts. It's no big deal.
So something else you can try, though, now that you know where they're laying, is put your smaller egg boxes if you have room still in the enclosure as well, and see if they choose the bigger one or the smaller one. If you're lining it up with where they were laying the egg. That's what I was going to say, is that maybe it's not that it's a bigger, the bigger tote is what made it faster for them. It was the proper temperature gradient that made it quicker for them that you weren't reaching previously.
Yeah, no, for sure. I think that's totally fair. And I'm definitely going to do that. There's so many things. It's like, it's really fun how the longer you do something, you just get more questions than answers.
Yeah.
And you can either say, well, I'm just going to do things the same way because you don't mess with success. And that's fine. And that's great. And I get that perspective too. I've definitely done that myself, but it's really fun to get more questions than answers and say, all right, well, okay, how do I address this now? What's next? Like, now I have to try half a dozen different things to see which of these things sticks to get the results that I want to get. It's fucking great. It's such a fun, iterative process. It can be infuriating sometimes, but it's awesome.
But it is exactly the Dunning-Kruger effect I was talking about earlier, where the more the more you know you don't know.
Yeah.
100%.
That's the great thing about the hobby, is the guys who are in it the longest. I was, early 2000s, I was like every other douchebag on king snake saying, no, this is the right way to do it. And then eventually I started realizing, hey, there's more than one way to do things. And just because it's my way doesn't mean it's the right way. Right. Ironically, going back to those early 2000s king snake days, Frank Reedus would constantly get in there and tell us that we're doing nest boxes all wrong. Fast forward to today.
Yeah,
I don't know that I'm doing what he wanted us to do back then, but I'm definitely doing something more in line with what he was suggesting back then, which is a larger, because you're saying it's small as a 10-gallon tote.
Yeah.
For snake people, 10 gallons is huge.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, they use little Tupperwares.
Yeah.
Little food containers. You don't have any 10-gallon food containers. So for me to go to a 10-gallon or 7-gallon tote for an egg opportunity, egg laying opportunity for my animals, I have a picture of one of my sulfuris where she's laying eggs out of the egg box. So the nest box I gave her wasn't even big enough for to put all her eggs in. And I imagine if she would have had this opportunity, she would have been just fine digging up a hole and laying it in that tote where I want her to. So to your point though, we need to constantly be thinking how we can improve stuff. And part of that is being able to go look at other people's collections, other people's methodologies on completely different species, but still in the same world of what we're doing.
Yeah, actually to that note, I was really excited because a couple of weeks ago, my wife and I were in Salida, Colorado, and we got to visit the Mount Shavano trout and salmon hatchery. And I learned so much crazy shit there that I had no idea was even happening. I had no clue that the native Colorado cutthroat trout would not be present in the wild in the numbers that it is if it wasn't in Colorado Parks and Wildlife. I had no idea that there's like a dozen or so hatcheries across the state that are responsible for stocking all of the waterways in Colorado with these game fish. I had no idea that the way they get the baby trout in the first place is by going and netting wild trout, squirting their eggs into a bucket, squirting the sperm from male trout into the bucket, mixing them together, cleaning them with iodine, and then putting them in vials to then bring to hatcheries to hatch, grow, and raise. Because otherwise you just wouldn't have the numbers of trout in the rivers that you do. The fact that they either deliver them by truck, by plane, by horseback into various parts of the backcountry, like this blew my fucking mind. I had no idea. And I mean, you want to talk about conservation through commercialization. You want to talk about weird anomalies. I was asking this guy at the hatchery, I'm like, they had a picture of albino rainbow trout on the wall. And I was like, so along with albinos, like what happens? Do you get other weird anomalies? And he just goes, oh yeah. Like he was like, duh. He was talking about every couple of generations, they get random cobalt blue trout, like bright blue trout that just, you'll get like 4 or 5 of them that just rip through the colony. And I'm like, well, wouldn't there be a demand for that? Wouldn't you just want to like take those and keep those and then go put them? But then based on the way that they collect the eggs in the first place, how are you going to do that? They collect them from wild fish. And then I learned that they have one whole facility down in Alamosa, Colorado, that all they do is non-game and non-game fish, non-game native fish, and boreal toads. And I'm like, wait a minute. You mean there's a government funded facility in my fucking state that just works with non-game fish and boreal toads? Where can I take a tour? Where do I pay? You show me the line. I'm going to sign it and I'm going to go because I'm going to go and I'm going to annoy the shit out of every single person there and ask them, what kind of tubs do you use? Where do you get them? What kind of problems do you run into 10 generations down the line? How are you thinking about nutrition? There's so many fucking questions. And, I mean, it's awesome. It's so fucking cool that this is a thing. And I can't wait to have more conversations just like this, but about Uromastyx. I can't wait for some fucking nerd in 30 years to show up at my facility and be like, well, how do the ornates now differ from the ones you got from the wild in Israel back 30 years ago? And I'm going to be like, I hadn't even thought of that, you little fucking weirdo. It'll be great.
Did they mention they're doing all that work because they introduced largemouth bass at some point?
They said that it was due to the whirling disease. That's what I understood. Yeah, they said they said whirling disease came in and wiped out all the native fish. It just got into everything, grayling, cutthroat trout, carp, you name it. It just got into all these fish, wiped them out. And if it wasn't for these efforts by Colorado Parks and Wildlife, they just wouldn't have the trout at all, except for in isolated waterways where they were living normally anyway. And I already knew that cutthroat trout were the only native Colorado trout. But then, you've got You've got brook, brown, rainbow.
That's what it is there. They introduced all the other trout there.
Yeah,
in California, they introduced the bass and all the non-native trout in California and Colorado.
Yep.
It's crazy. It's fucking crazy. And I mean, you think about
Fisheries are a mess.
It's wild. It's fucking wild.
Florida said, "Hold my beer."
Right. I mean,
our waterways.
Seriously.
I used to make not a living, but I used to go cast net the canals down in West Palm Beach as a kid and sell all the exotics back to the pet stores way back in the day. Be able to cast that angelfish and all sorts of stuff.
Well, I was listening. There was a Long Now podcast / talk that I was listening to by, I think, Charles Mann with 2 N's. Now I could be messing this up. I'm pretty sure that's the guy. So don't quote me if. But he was giving a talk where he was sort of talking about the myopic illusion that we all tend to have this thing called generational myopia, which is to say that we assume that the world that we were born into, that's the way things had always been. We kind of have that weird baseline assumption kind of built in, but it's a total fabrication. He said something like, I don't remember this statistic, but it was a massive number of the flora and fauna in the San Francisco Bay. Like the huge percentage of it is totally invasive. It's just not real. It was never there before. And it's as a result of the ballasts in ships, right? So it was they would use water to ballast these ships, and they would ballast them in, wherever the fuck in the world. And then they would sail all the way around and then get to the San Francisco Bay, and then they'd empty their ballasts into the existing ecosystem, right? Whether it's the fact that earthworms and honeybees are not native to the United States or North America, yet here they are. Whether it's the rubber plantations down in Brazil, right? I mean, all like the rubber plant, right? Certain African grasses that are used for cattle farming in Brazil that are just overtaking the native plant life, right? And again, we can talk all day about whether or not these things are good or bad, right? I don't have a formal opinion on that, but the illusion.
Formal opinion.
Yeah, you could take this. Here's this formal opinion, Roy. No, I'm just kidding. But it's just interesting to me because it's like, okay, his whole point, the whole point of his talk was to say this idea that we had this pristine biosphere and then humans got in here and started fucking everything up is just incomplete at best, right? Mm-hmm. And so then when we talk about that in the context of, how many of us now know about the weird invasive species problem here in the United States in various ways, and everyone wants to talk about it being Burmese pythons and whatever, but nobody wants to talk about it being fucking cats or pigs or
horses,
which is huge.
Horses.
And
horses out west where you guys are get $1 million. Well, it was one of the screwed up things since the 70s. None of the presidents afforded any more than $1 million to solar research, all the way up until Obama.
Yeah.
But that entire time, they were also giving at least $1 to $3 million a year to the wild horses that are invasive out west to protect them.
Yeah.
So we can't do anything to protect the environment, but we can protect the invasive species within the environment at a federal level because they were an iconic part of Americana.
Yeah.
So, charismatic megafauna.
Yeah.
But they are a native species if you go back far enough, but it's like 10,000 years back.
Right.
Yeah.
But
that,
not the same horse.
But that in and of itself encapsulates, like, at what point do you consider something native? It's all about your context and your time scale. At what point do Fiji iguanas become native to Fiji? Will you tell me when they landed there? or when they became genetically distinct from whatever ancestor iguana put them there in the first place. When were they native? You tell me, right? Yeah. Like it's a weird thing to think about. And of course it's not complete, because they're, like the dingo. Everybody uses the dingo as a famous example because they're not native to Australia. They've just been there for 10,000 fucking years. So everybody's cool with it, right? But it's like, I think that's an interesting thing to kind of consider, right? Because even if we remove it from the natural world, well, that's not even, I don't even like that term in this particular context, but like, let's just take out, sort of nature, let's just talk about species existing in captivity. And the way that flexes, changes, evolves, and sort of like an amoebic shape, right? At what point did we domesticate tulips, horses, chickens, pigs, guinea pigs, hamsters, ferrets, weasels? All these weird, various domesticated animals. Okay, well, at some point, conceivably, to domesticate the cow, we had to take these wild things, wild bovids, and we're going to fuck with them, and we're going to put them in a place where they don't want to be. And then eventually it became this thing that we work together, and it's sort of symbiotic in a weird way, and we're all good with it, whatever. That process fascinates me with regard to reptiles and amphibians, because conceivably in 500 years, we might be at a similar point. Like at what point are we going to be, is there going to be some ancestor sulfurious that's like, really cool with people and just loves chickens, only wants to eat chickens? I have no idea. I'm just obviously.
Well, it sounds like Handsome Boy.
Yeah.
We're already there, man.
Yeah, we're there. We're done.
Well, I think we are kind of there with the like ball pythons and corn snakes, where they're so far from what they were naturally, but you can still see the natural version of them. Yeah. So right. You do have some of that. It benefits us, behooves us as a reptile community to say we are domesticating these animals, because that gives us a different leg up when it comes to fighting laws and whatnot in certain ways. We were trying that here in the state of Florida, and unfortunately, I kept asking. It was the weirdest thing. A couple of years ago, the only campaigning I was hearing about was for the Department of Ag. And this guy kept running these ads for Department of Ag. And I'm like, aren't we trying to move reptiles from FWC to Department of Ag? Does anybody know if this guy's going to be good with that? Yeah. And nobody had an answer. But also this guy, I don't think we had a chance, but because this guy ran, like, November's the election. I think in like April, he started running ads. Nobody was running ads. There was no other campaigns that you were even aware of. This guy ran ads nonstop on the radio. He wanted that position that badly. Now that he's in there, we were given an opportunity down here to discuss with the Department of Ag moving reptiles there, and he's got no interest. They're not agricultural. Well, we're breeding them and they're domesticated to a point. So why aren't they agricultural? FWC doesn't have any control over cats because they're a domesticated pet. So everybody, it's one of those things that if you know the actual reality of it, when people say something stupid like, well, why aren't we regulating cats in the wild? And, cats do more damage than snakes in the wild, and cats eat more than snakes. And okay, but FWC has no jurisdiction over cats. The way the laws are written, they don't. So it's a stupid thing to say. Yeah. It's stupid for other reasons beyond that, but for what your argument you're trying to make, it's even worse because they don't have that jurisdiction. That's why they're not doing anything. Your question is, why aren't they doing something? It's because they don't have the jurisdiction. That's the end of that question. So,
go ahead.
The society as a whole right now is, somebody was giving me shit today because I pointed out that they were talking about this submarine that went down, and why didn't they have a GPS tracker on it like they do with sharks? So you put them on sharks, why can't you put them on a submarine? It's like, well, because the shark trackers don't work unless they're dry for 90 seconds. So they only ping whenever they're at the surface for a minute and a half or longer. So you could put that on the submersible, but it would be pretty fucking useless because it's not going to be dry until it's back to the surface. In which case you'll be like, oh, it's right there. I can see it from the ship. Like there's no purpose for that. You know, your GPS reader doesn't work if you drive through a drive-through. You think it's going to work 2,000 feet, 5,000, 10,000 feet under the surface of the ocean? That's not how those trackers work.
There's a lot of experts on deep sea submersibles that have emerged in the last 48 hours.
But their contention was, well, that's not the point. I'm like, well, no, the point is you guys are making stupid comments about something that doesn't actually have, like, we can't as a society continue to not have a basis of facts affect the conversation we're having. Because that's how we get more interested about whether or not Clinton had a child sex ring out of a pizza parlor and Trump got pissed on by some hookers. Like neither of those have any bearing on anything, and they probably have no basis in fact. Why are we even bringing those into the conversation?
Totally.
And now with how this election cycle is going to be nuts with all the fake, the deep fakes you can pull off now. Like the fact that we've, as a society over the last 5-10 years, have just gotten so far from caring about facts and reality in our day-to-day conversations and using these ridiculous, non-pertinent statements to relate to other things. It's playing into the role of where politics is going to be able to do whatever they want because we can't even communicate on a level that's based on fact anymore. Like we don't like facts.
Yeah, you have to be able to agree. You have to be able to agree on what a set of facts are before you can litigate anything, right? It's like that's what you do, you know. In like a courtroom, it's like you have to present like this is the evidence. Yeah, that's impartial, right?
The facts should be facts. Yeah, I guess that's
exactly. That's what I'm saying too. Is that like in that kind of situation, like you that's the first thing that happens is like you agree on like this is the set of evidence that we have. These are the facts that we have. That isn't to be questioned. What's to be questioned is then how you interpret those things. But now we're in a whole different world where it's like, well, now we've entered the realm of alternative facts where it's like, you're not talking about your interpretations of what the facts are. You're saying, well, I have these other facts.
or just making stupid. Well, I guess.
And that's a whole other realm.
The people making stupid memes where they think the memes don't matter. It's like, no, the memes absolutely matter because if you're making memes not based in facts, you're excluding facts from your conversation. Well, it doesn't matter. It's just a meme. But it's being spread, and some people are too stupid to get that it's just a meme.
Yeah.
And that's our whole society nowadays. But anyway,
it's like that statement about like, what is it? It's like, you remember back when people used to think that that like stupidity was about like having a lack of information. Like it wasn't that.
Well, it's people choose not to look for information though. It's not that information's available and they're actively choosing not to look for it. They don't want to learn things. And that's kind of back to reptiles. That's where the whole idea of the care sheets come out.
Yeah.
Like all that information's available. I didn't have it. You didn't have it. We both did okay with sulfurous. You went a step further and said, well, what fucking plant lives in this thing's neighborhood? All right, I want that plant. Like that's a whole nother level of searching for information. We can find all that information. People are just too lazy. They want it spoon fed to them. So, which I don't mind helping people with things. I don't mind talking to them and explaining things and giving them parameters. But it's always a baseline, and you should be looking further and deeper from that baseline in any which way you can.
Totally. I mean, it's like, but like you say, there's just you can't satisfy everybody, you know, unless like you said, unless you're spoon feeding. It's like I've gone to the trouble of writing out, you know, more than one article on sulfurous at this point. It took me many hours to sit there and compile all this information. I provide references. There's a whole like reading list for people that want to check things out. And people will ask me stuff and I can direct them to that, but then I can't get them to read it.
Yeah.
I can't make them read it.
Frankly, Roy, I'm a little irritated that you even told me that you had references for the article. No. I mean, that's. I feel like, in some ways, our interpretation of what people do and don't do is slightly skewed, because, and I say that because we all have Instagram accounts. We all have a presence on social media in which people see what we're up to and pay attention to what we're doing. And don't get me wrong, I get annoyed as shit sometimes when people message me, ask me a question. I'm saying, hey, bro, I've got a care guide and I've got a whole YouTube channel where I not only have extra information, but I've literally sat and read the care guide for you as in video format. So you can just listen to it if you want to. I made like an audio version of my care guide for uromastics. And I've provided a link to different resources on my website that have links to various other care guides. I put the book that you should buy in the care guide. Like all this stuff is out there. And they're like, can't you just tell me? No, I can't. You fuck. No, I fucking can't. You can fucking go read it because I did. And anybody, and it gets annoying. So don't get me wrong. I'm as annoyed as you are. But I think the vast majority of people, they definitely go read it and they go look. They just don't bother you with it. You know what I mean? They don't tell you that they went and read it. I have some people now, this has been a really cool phenomenon. People come to me and say, hey, I've been looking at all your videos. I've read your care guide and I have some questions. And I'm like, yeah, let's go. Let's do it. Let's talk now, And I just think I think our reception of that probably skews towards hearing from people who are not interested in doing that, because they're reaching out to you on your Instagram because you're available on Instagram, and they're going to be like, this guy will just fucking tell me, it'll be fine,
Yes, where I see that being social media just has kind of dumbed us all down a bit. I was the content provider for the CHS business page for years. I still technically am. I just haven't done anything on there for a while. I would share every new scientific discovery I came across, every first time breeding, new species discovered, just interesting things. And I would get mild interactions. 20 likes, 100 likes, maybe. I shared it because I'm pretty sure the picture is actually from Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago, where they have a number of male red-footed tortoises in an enclosure together, and the males will mount each other. And the picture is two turtles mounting each other, or one turtle mounting the other turtle, really. And the caption is, or tortoise. That's the caption. The caption is, I guess, like, Daddy, what kind of turtles are those? And as well, son, they're tortoises. And like, if you're going to teach your kid about herpetology, who will?
Yeah.
Stupid
I know this one.
Got like over 1,000 likes.
Yeah.
Like probably 150 comments on it. It got shared like 600-800 times from that page. Yeah. Nothing interacted like that thing did. And I was very critical about other individuals within the hobby who were putting out pages that were reporting on reptiles, and they were going to the lowest common denominator for their post. There was a guy whose reticulated python popped out of its enclosure while he was driving his vehicle, and it crawled into his daughter's car seat.
Ugh.
And its head was like on her shoulder, and he snapped a picture of it.
Ugh.
And like, oh, I had a little escape today. And that got shared. I'm like, why would you share that? Like, is it dangerous? No. We as reptile people know it's not dangerous, but is it perceived danger? Absolutely. So why would you allow perceived danger to not only be shared, but you to actively share it? Someone else posted it in not bad taste. It's
bad faith.
Without thinking it through.
Yeah.
And then you grabbed it and shared it again on your platform to much more people to spread. Like I'm an advocate for not doing that. Yeah. If you see something that's bad, these guys who free handle, I'm not going to ever share their post to say, look at this guy. You're just promoting them.
Yeah.
So exactly. It used to be the old saying was you vote with your dollars, and now it's you vote with your shares.
With your shares and your likes, absolutely. So I try not to ever share something I don't agree with. There's a video of the guy getting strangled by a python in some Eastern European circus. Whoa. And it was actually great because it shows back to, we're tagging you back into snake talk. It shows you how good snakes are at constricting, just like a triangle choke. The guy got the snake wrapped around his neck, and it was a 2-second.
Very brief.
He knew he was in trouble for 2 seconds, then he dropped out. And it was so instantaneous. The crowd, the other people there at the circus, all thought it was a joke. They all thought it was part of the show because it was too quick. Yeah. That's not how you get choked out. Well, you didn't get choked out. You had your blood stopped. Totally different. Yep. You can get choked out for 2 minutes. You can't get your blood stopped for 2 minutes. You get your blood stopped for seconds and you're out. And it was but I posted there's a video floating around where a guy gets killed by a python or possibly killed by a python. I'm not going to share that. Blah, blah, blah. I went on but everybody else would share the actual video. And in retrospect, it was actually a great learning experience because that's where boas have only killed a couple people in the U.S. ever. I think it's 2, exactly 2. And one of those was fairly recently in the last decade where a guy was at a park with his buddy. His buddy was scared of snakes. He threw his bow around his neck and was trying to screw with his buddy. The snake cinched up, cut off the blood flow. He dropped out. His buddy was too scared to help him, and he got killed by the snake. And it wasn't that the bow itself was dangerous, it's that you shouldn't put the thing around your neck to begin with. And if you start cinching around your carotid artery, you probably are already too late. So that's why you don't put it around your neck.
Right.
But it's things like that where we need to better educate people and not share the garbage without at least using it as educational opportunity.
Yeah. Well said.
Positive. Yeah.
Well said.
That. Absolutely.
I don't think people truly respect how quickly you go out when you get your carotid shut off.
Sometimes you got to practice it a few times before you know exactly how quick it can happen. Take somebody who genuinely chokes people for a living. So
that's always my example. Is if you watch UFC, you see a guy go back in mid punch and go out. You see it constantly. Triangle chokes, they go, I'm going to throw a punch and, oh no, I'm down. I'm not throwing anything. Like if it's that fast, it's that fast.
Yeah. And there's a direct correlation between how long you apply pressure and how long the person is out. So if you hold for 5 to 10 seconds, they're going to be out for 5 to 10 seconds, sometimes a little bit more. And then if you apply pressure and hold it for 30 seconds plus, then you're in the realm of real brain damage.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah.
A minute and they're dead for sure. Yeah.
And snakes they're not trying to do it in the first place in most cases. They're just holding on because they felt unsafe.
Yep.
So it's not that the snakes themselves are dangerous. It's that humans put themselves in dangerous situations.
Yeah. Yep. True enough. Gentlemen, I want to say, we're cruising. We're coming right up on like 3 hours, which is fucking awesome for starters. Like I love this. I should say I have to go eat dinner here very soon with Rach, but I don't either. If you guys want to keep the conversation going, I'm happy to bow out if you guys want to keep going. Also, if we wanted to move to a close, Jason, we got to have you back on again, man. I mean, you clearly have a lot to say and a lot of things that I want to hear more about. So I'd like to leave that door open if it's something that would be interesting to you.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Want to see where do you guys fall on this?
Yeah, I think we should move towards wrapping it. I know it's like 10 p.m. where Jason is.
Yeah, man.
And I know that he's a workhorse, so he probably still has stuff to do, I'd imagine.
I got to make one more run out there for sure, just for the quail.
See, there you go.
Breeding quail seemed like a good idea, but then turns out they need to actually have attention pretty damn frequently, not like reptiles.
Yeah, it's a whole other thing, man. Well, all right. Well, yeah, I agree. We do got to have you back at some point if you'd be willing, just because there's a bunch of other stuff I want to talk to you about. But we close every show with the same question, and that's who do you think would win in a fight, like a silverback gorilla or a brown bear?
Definitely a brown bear. Thanks for having me on, guys.
That's the correct answer.
Have a good night.
All right. So the real question, why herpetoculture? And that's, why do you do it? Why do we do it? Why does it matter?
Oh, I think I got into it just because I've always had, I think that's the reason a lot of us get into it, is with that kind of obsessive personality types that we have. You don't go do martial arts 6 to 7 days a week without having obsessive personalities. You don't rebuild an entire building without some sort of obsessive personality. And yeah, I grew up with baseball cards and then magic cards and all sorts of different collectibles growing up. And then basketball was my obsession for a while. So I think it's a personality type that a lot of us have, is that there's something there where we find something we're interested in, and then we want to devour everything about it. Whether that's physically or mentally, or in this case, both, which I think that's why herpetoculture works out so well for us, is that it is a physical undertaking to set things up, to do things, to take care of your animals, but it's also a mental undertaking where even if you're just doing something that's simple to breed, but you're trying to do different genetics and to get into those and try to figure that all out. And I think all of us go into that at some point or another. Not all of us, but a lot of us go into that at some point or another, where we're trying to figure out the triple recessive combos and things like that. And it's good brain activity, and also that it gives you a community which you don't. I think that's a big part of it, actually, is you give you a community to interact with that you don't have after high school. You get out of high school and just kind of the people you work with. You don't have anybody else to talk to, and you don't have a reason to talk to people half the time. With the reptile community, like you run into all aspects of society in the reptile community, from literally homeless to doctors to neurosurgeons to rocket scientists to everybody in between. And you easily find out that appearances mean nothing. Some of the most brilliant people you're ever going to run into have some of the most standoffish appearances in one way or another, and will barely talk to you half the time. But if you get them going, they'll just trounce you with knowledge. And it's just, I don't know. There's nothing I don't like about the reptile community, except the parts I don't like about the reptile community.
That's very well said.
I love going to the shows, but there's also there's parts of the shows I don't like. There's parts of the monotony at shows I don't like. And there's certain individuals that are obviously like, I'm never a glory seeker, fame seeker. I want my recognition for what I do. And if you're going to come at me and say that you're going to do something better than me, I fucking love that, dude. Give me some competition. Give me something to shoot for. Give me some reason to get pissed off and jump on Team Hood or something. But talk shit about me, please. That gives me that little bit of extra. But
listen, I can safely tell you, I'm not confident I'm on Team Hood. No,
that's fine. Many people aren't. But no, I'm also not trying to always get the fame, though. There's some people that are just in it for the fame. Like I want to be recognized for when I achieve something.
Yeah.
I don't want to be recognized just to be recognized. I want to be recognized because I flipped some animals. So I think it gives everybody that, but people who want to be recognized for flipping animals or just for fame, everything's here. Herpetoculture is all of our society kind of condensed into a weird twist of everything. It's such an interesting community we have. Because our community is the entire community outside of us, including other countries.
Yeah, true enough. Very well said.
Totally. I was just thinking about that the other day, that it's just like, it's like all of my problems with herpetoculture are the same as my problems with society.
Yeah.
It's just a microcosm of everything else, and it's cool. It's cool to have that though, because it's like, there's so many things that I get exposed to through herpetoculture that I otherwise kind of insulate myself from to stay sane, and I think that's good for me.
There's some consistent knowledge that if you find out someone's a herper, like a real herper, then they're going to know where Papua New Guinea is. They're going to know where Togo is. They're going to know where Suriname or Guyana is.
Yeah.
Hopefully. So there's a baseline knowledge. They're going to have a general understanding of genetics and of how to do things. So there's like that's where we all come together, is that we share this knowledge without realizing we share this knowledge, and we build on each other. That's why I'm always willing to help everybody else around me and that are coming up behind me. I always help people because I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing without someone doing it before me and figuring it out.
Yeah.
So we're always building on each other. But then there's those little things that annoy you in everyday society. The assholes that are, cutting you off on the street. They're the same guys in the herp community too, that are they're doing something where they just don't care about anybody but themselves. That's just how society is. So it's not really even a problem with the herp community. It's a problem with society that those people fall into the herp community.
Yeah, exactly.
True. We can't pick who's here. All we can do is deal with what we have.
Yep. Try and get along as we can.
It's just like the rest of society. You can ignore all the people that you don't mesh with and keep moving on.
Yeah, exactly.
Do what I do.
Yep, pretty much same here. He loves that. Cool. Well, we should wrap it up. We're at 3 hours. Where can folks find you, Jason, on socials if they want to reach out, bug you about the red sulfurious you got hatching soon and all that stuff?
My name, Jason Hood, on Facebook. And then I was pretty sure that when I just did this other podcast, I gave out my Instagram backwards. Yeah, Snakes Unlimited _ Jason Hood. I think I did it backwards previously.
Nice.
Unlimited Snakes the other day.
I did Jason Hood _ Snakes Unlimited, but it's Snakes Unlimited _ Jason Hood. And Snakes Unlimited on Facebook as well. So
cool. I'll have links to all that stuff too for anybody listening that needs a little boost.
Sick.
Thanks for having me on, guys, and I appreciate it. Yeah, if anybody wants some quail, look me up. I think I'm the only guy commercially selling button quail right now, so I got that hooked up for everybody.
Yes, you do, and that's an important one. Like, they're hard to find. So
yeah, my buddy just fed one to a newborn corn snake. This year's corn that wasn't feeding for him, and he was worried about it. He's like, man, I don't know, it's too big, and ate it. And he's like, man, it's way too big. I don't know. And next day it was gone. And that's the beauty of the quail, is they digest so fast. And it's so much less stress on the animals.
Yeah, it's true. I fed one to my Texas alligator lizards.
What?
They each got one. Yeah, they totally went for it.
Okay,
that was
maybe
pretty sweet.
Yeah, we'll get you.
Try them out.
The Uromastics will definitely eat them.
Yeah, I mean, they might. You never know. Dude, you'd be surprised. But I also have pill bar rock monitors, and
pill bars would love them.
Yeah, I'm sure they. So yeah, let's talk about it.
Yeah, no, I'm using them for the yellow tree monitors and the Ackies right now.
Sick.
They're not even letting them sit there for a second. They're destroying them. So, I'm thrilled with how well the quail are going for me. I just gotta find more time to actually market them and try to get people knowledgeable on them. Because that's another thing, is introducing it's not a new food item, but the button quail are new because people don't understand how small they are. And then the Coturnix quail, we didn't really get onto it. I know we're late already, but rodents for snakes just are not a complete diet. You know, I've always fed chicks and stuff added into my stuff, but there's so many people that only feed rodents to their animals, and it's like that. You can't eat. I don't care what it is. You can't eat one thing forever, and it's always going to be good for you.
That's true.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
But yeah, man, I'll hook you up if you're looking for quail. I got your hookup. Got about 1,500 of each sitting in the freezer right now.
I need it.
Excellent.
Sick.
Right on, man. Well, we'll be bugging you soon to have you back. And in the meantime, take care. Thanks again, man.
Absolutely, but